All right, thank you. Now I don't have to yell. I won't take up too much of your time tonight, but I did want to start with just congratulating the town, the leaders of the town, as well as the service providers and folks who are putting all of their efforts towards making this community a better place for older adults and for all of us to get older and live successful lives into the future. A lot of things are very difficult that the council has to consider, a lot of very challenging work ahead of all of you, but it is good to know that where there is an ability to make progress, that we are making progress and that it's actually touching people's lives in a tangible and meaningful way. So with that, I'd also like to thank Town Manager Laurel Prevetti and Katie Nakamura for spending time with me every quarter, talking about issues that are important to older adults and forecasting for the future and seeing how we might be able to partner together down the road. So for tonight, I've got a little bit of an update. So if I can get to the next slide here, we'll talk about the issues for today. The community assessment survey for older adults that we did in partnership with the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, as well as the Senior Committee, members of which are here tonight. Some of these data that we found in the community assessment survey was, I think, prescient for the community to hear a little bit more about. The foundation and some of the other work that's being done has used a lot of this data to make some decisions and to plot a path forward. But I found some other insights that I thought would be interesting for the council for tonight. I'd also like to give an update on the Reach Your Destination Easily, or RIDE, Senior Transportation Program. Talk about a very exciting project with West Valley Mission Community College District that we just launched in October. And then discuss briefly some of the provider support needs that exist in the town and some interesting ways that we might be able to partner to help resolve some of those issues. So we'll go to the next slide, please. This is a little bit small, but on the font here, but the Los Gatos Community Assessment Survey for older adults was a statistically valid, randomized sample survey conducted in partnership again with the town. We surveyed a total of 2,400 older adult households where there was a person there over the age of 60. We got 631 completed surveys for a response rate of just over 26%, with a margin of error plus or minus just under 4%. What that means is we can depend on this data, we can extrapolate it to the general population, and we can make solid decisions based on this information. So some of the graphics that you see here, one of them, overall community quality. As a place to live and retire, generally Los Gatans really do love where they live. They love Los Gatos. 88 out of 100 score. So it's a place where people want to stay in their community. They want to live here as long as they can. And they would also recommend that others remain in the community and stay here for as long as we can. So again, a lot of your other decisions that you have to make really have an influence on this. But it's an indication that this is a strong community, a community that values its older adults, as well as the place that they call home. Now, a slide that actually we want to make some improvements on here is employment and finances. So we got a score of 28 out of 100 on employment. And some of the categories on the next slide, there's a little bit more about it. But as we get older, we do face challenges becoming employed, staying employed, having the correct skill set to maintain our employment or to re-enter the employment after retirement. And so the quality of jobs that are available to older adults is really lacking, and their access and ability to get jobs as we get older could really use a lot of support. Having enough finances to maintain your lifestyle, maintain your home, is also a 55 out of 100. So people do have quite a bit of struggle maintaining their financial situation. Obviously, we understand that here in the cost of living, the cost of housing. So that is reflected in this survey data. We've got health and wellness, healthcare being 65 out of 100. It's a broader topic. It's about more of access, how far away you have to go, the costs associated with it, and your dependence on the system, the healthcare system. Independent living, 36 out of 100. As we get older, you know, we have a lot of people in the mountainside and in the hillside here that as they get older, it's really tough to maintain those properties. And living independently, you know, as our RIDE senior transportation program has taught us, a lot of the folks who live in some of these really sprawling estates, actually end up almost imprisoned in them because as a loved one passes away or as they start to be unable to manage that property, it becomes a really tough situation to be in. Mental health services, something that the county has really tried to address in the West Valley recently, as well as funding put up by the town, 46 out of 100. And so that tells us that we've got some work to do, but you all are actually doing something about it. There's some matching funds that have been designated to the town. And I applaud the work that you're doing to address the mental health needs of older adults as a stakeholder group. Physical health, though, we're at a 79 out of 100. So this town does have a lot of great hiking trails, and it's a really active community. People do get out when and where they can, and we have service providers like Los Gatos Recreation that offers physical health services to older adults. So these are some things that I think your committees and your stakeholder groups can kind of look at from a 30,000-foot lens, if you will, and then start to use some of the information to create some responsive programming. On the bottom there's a crosstab section that I wanted to just encourage our stakeholders here to look through different lenses. It says that it accesses the availability of affordable quality mental health care services. The overall score was 46, but if you look at it broken down by age bracket, 60 to 65, 32% of those people rated their availability of affordable mental health services as good or excellent. So we have more, the seniors that are on the younger side of the spectrum really don't feel like they have enough access to those supports. As they get older, 52% in the 75 to 84 percentile age bracket believe that they have access to excellent or good mental health services. So we have the ability to break these numbers down into a lot of different segments and categories that allow us to dive deeper into the numbers and make some more targeted and creative solutions. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. Again, functional data does provide us the ability to create responsive programming. Some of these categories here are really something to pay attention to, and with the population of Los Gatos getting older, it's something that a growing number of people will be facing. 31% of people indicated that they face problems finding opportunities to build work skills. 38% of people 75 to 84 believe that they are suffering from some type of depression or reporting depression. 20% of people 60 to 74 experience age discrimination in the society or either at the workplace or in public. 40% of 60 to 65-year-olds are providing care to someone age 55 and older. I mean, that's a staggering number when you think about it. And these are people that are working, a lot of them, and so they're also providing care to someone at home. And then another 21% reported being a victim of a scam or a crime, 1 in 5. So when you're seeing your neighbors out there walking down the street, a lot of folks don't really talk about their situations at home. They may not feel comfortable doing it. And our service providers and the community of service providers are here to meet that need. And so using this as a backdrop, our organization partners with others to create some of the, as I termed it here, responsive programming that helps to meet some of these needs. So we can go to the next slide. If you look back over the last 12 months, this is a really interesting demographic here, characteristic of what we see. Rating one of these issues as a minor, moderate, or major problem. Building skills for paid or unpaid work. Overall, 31% of people say that it's a problem. They've had a problem building these work skills. 60 to 65, 32%. 22% in the 65 to 74. But if you look at the number 75 to 84, you got 44% of people in that age group are saying that they have a problem finding the ability to build work skills for paid or unpaid work. Now, there's another statistic that we found in this research that there's about 70% of the Los Gatos population is saying that they plan to work into their 70s. So this kind of dovetails with that in indicating that as they get to that age demographic, they don't feel as competitive in the workplace, and they don't have the skills to be valued in today's workplace. Now, this isn't to knock employers. Employers do have needs that they want met, and we need to do a job as a society of preparing older adults for the modern workplace. You may have had a job for 25 years or 30 years and done that job successfully, and you know how to do that job, and you know how to do that job well. And a person who just came out of college or a training program has a skill set that is applicable to today's job force. So that employer is forced with making a decision. So what we can do is we can create new training opportunities to build skills for older adults that allow them to be competitive in today's workplace. And we really need it because the workforce is about to be predominantly people in that age bracket. So how we use the CASOA data, along with our partners, we analyze the information, we talk with the community, and we create programs that we feel meet some of the most urgent needs. And then depending on the partnerships that are available, we try to create even more creative and innovative things that push the boundaries. So we can go to the next one. One of the classic examples of this is the RIDE Senior Transportation Program, launched in 2017. Los Gatos was one of the first communities to sign on and provide some of that initial support funding to get that program launched and off the ground, so to speak, and on the road. And so in 2023, I've got some statistics here. We have 208 RIDE clients from the town of Los Gatos. That's up 36% over last year, so we're seeing more people getting into the program. Total rides given to Los Gatos residents, 1,483. That's up 26% over last year. Now, the RIDE program, for those of you who don't know, RIDE is designed for people who can no longer drive, who are over the age of 65. And for whatever reason, they can't be on the road safely for themselves, and so we created this program. The interesting thing about RIDE, and the thing that differentiates it from Uber or Lyft or some of the other rideshare programs, is that all of our drivers are trained in social services and senior issues. Our provider network is also available to all of our RIDE clients, and our drivers are trained to recognize signs of need, neglect, food insecurity, housing insecurity, and they make referrals on the spot for people for socialization or other needs that they may have. So the trust that gets built in that car is what leads to people taking advantage of other programs that they might not otherwise take advantage of. As you can see, out of the 208 clients that we have for RIDE, 98% of them are in the low income category. One of the things that I realized when I was on the County Senior Care Commission, I was on that for almost a decade and chaired it twice. Going around the county, hearing the feedback about the West Valley was, that's the place where all the wealthy people are at, they don't need our help. And so they concentrate services in other places that rightfully have a need. But we have a need here in the West Valley, and it's oftentimes overshadowed. And so if you look at that number, almost 1,500 rides this year to 208 people, 98% of which are low income, they would not be able to leave their house if it were not for this program. They don't have the money to get a cab, an Uber. They may lack the technological know-how to even do something like that. And they darn sure can't afford it. RIDE, in that category of 98 percentile, we're giving people a ride 4 miles or less for 90 cents a trip, under $1. So they can really go anywhere that they want to go. And as you can see, the average trip distance of 6 miles, they're going local. They're going right around their home base. And it's going to the senior center, the adult rec center, the shopping, or medical. Those are our top 3 destinations. People also use it to go visit friends, go see a movie, go have lunch. But it's socialization and their real basic needs of life that they really use with this program. Now, the RIDE Senior Transportation, to take a quick step back, that was launched in response to the community assessment survey that we did in Saratoga in 2016. We took that information, we learned that transportation and getting people to and from where they needed to go was one of the biggest needs because of VTA's bus cuts to the West Valley. So we used that information, we got our stakeholders together, including West Valley Community Services, launched the program, and here we are today, 6 years later with a very successful program that's now in 7 cities. So it's the model has really been proven, and I think it goes to show that when you use that real statistical information, you listen to the community, you get stakeholders like elected officials behind it, and you can really make some powerful stuff happen. And speaking of that, I'll go to the next slide. One of the most exciting things that we have going on now is the Senior Guided Pathways program in partnership with West Valley Mission Community College District. This is a program that was 2 years in the making. We worked directly with Chancellor Brad Davis in his office to design the program and the elements of the program. That could be a whole meeting in and of itself, so I'm not going to take a whole lot of time diving into the weeds. But essentially what we're doing, we're looking at 3 pillars. The first one is lifelong learning opportunities for older adults that will provide them with both social scenarios as well as skill building for the workplace, so that they can have their stake in their community. The second pillar is creating new pathways to employment and to careers for traditional college-age students that want to work in the aging services sector. And what that looks like is new certificate programs in caregiving, elder care, residential care facilities. The county just did a caregiving survey countywide, and the top recommendation was to train more caregivers. We have a wave of people who will need that service. And if anyone here knows about getting caregiving services, what you get from that group of workers is really all over the map. You don't really know the skill level. It could be someone who was taking care of their relative and grandmother for the past 5 years, or it could be someone who came out of a certification program, and they're both called caregivers. And so in the evening, you can have someone different than the morning, and their skill set's all over the map. Creating certification programs and then bringing employers to the table that are a part of the advisory committees that design the curriculum is part of this program, and we will create the new wave of caregiving services and also careers in the aging services sector for college students. And then the third pillar is creating a center for aging, similar to the College for Adaptive Arts at West Valley College. We will create a center for aging at West Valley College and Mission College in Santa Clara under this program. So it's just taking off. The easiest access for the older adults who are interested in being a part of the program, we've really broken down the barrier. Senior centers like SASE, we offer a membership to the community. When you get a membership, you have access to certain things. Well, now, under this program, all members of SASE will automatically be registered as students at West Valley College and or Mission College. We will then offer them a slate of different pathways that they can choose that consist of 5 classes. And those classes result in a skill set of either job skills or recreational skills, post-retirement enjoyment, wellness, healthcare navigation. And then there's also a set of a la carte classes that they can take. But we have student success coaches that are trained at our facility to help them with registration, enrollment, submission of assignments, and so on, navigating that online system. And we're doing all of that in partnership with the new leadership team at West Valley College, which is a fantastic development. So if we can go to the next slide, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone here, to everyone in the audience, and to all those who are dedicated to helping older adults remain in their community as long as possible with the brightest possible outlooks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Do any council members have questions? Council Member Hides and then Council Member Moore.
Yeah, thank you for the report, and thank you for your talent and capability in serving the older adult community. You're really a really valuable resource to a large number of people in our community. And it was good to see the survey again. It was an important part of what we used when we were developing the roadmap, and helped to inform some things. This West Valley is very exciting, and I'm interested in a couple of things, some of which are related to a later agenda item, which is the upgrades to the Adult Rec Center. And so to what degree do you think that this program at West Valley would benefit by, in-person registration or navigation in Saratoga and in Los Gatos?
So I think the in-person support is going to be key to the demographic that we will see early on in the program. If we look at the slide from earlier that showed that it was people on the 70 and up scale that really wanted that support of getting back into the workplace, I think that in-person training and assistance with registration and class selection is going to be key. And that's why we're having our staff members trained at West Valley College in their Office of Student Success, Admissions and Records on how to navigate the system successfully. We actually even hired some people who used to work there so that they're really skilled at navigating that process. As part of it, we're also making internships and employment opportunities available to West Valley College students to work in this program.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very exciting program, and I know a lot of folks who like the idea that they're going to be automatically registered as students at these great community colleges. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for being here this evening. I always sincerely appreciate your commitment and Sassy's commitment to our older adult community and clearly our community at large. And I think Sassy is really so valuable and very, very thankful for everything you're doing. So two different questions. So the first is about RIDE. I'm not surprised that there was a big uptick. I'm curious what you see as the future of that program and how you hope to, I kind of see that as a little bit of a supplement to our poor public transportation infrastructure in the West Valley here. And so I think, just this year we had the bus routes cut even further. And so I'm curious if you kind of see that expanding and also how you could see other community partners or municipalities playing a bigger role in, expanding that service, because I think that's crucial.
Thank you, Councilmember Moore. This program, we do want to see it in all of Santa Clara County within the next 5 years. It's in almost half of the county now. We are serving South County as far as Morgan Hill. The expansion, though, what we're looking at is as our population ages, the people who are in their 50s and 60s now and early 70s now, they're a little more tech savvy than we might give folks credit for. And so we are developing an app right now that can be used by folks who want to be in the program as well as their families. And then the model for scaling, one of the most difficult things being a community service provider is being in the competition for all of the competing demands that councils and governments have to face when we're asking for money. And so we want to be as creative as we can with our revenue models so that we can help support the growth and make it sustainable. So as a part of this project, actually, that's how we plan to scale up, is by using the community colleges as one of our new funding partners, as well as keeping our existing state grant. We have a grant through the state of California, our county grant, but probably not asking the cities for direct contributions. We want to play more of a supportive role, and we would hope that that money that you do have goes into the community to those services that are most needed, as opposed to having us compete for that and slicing up the pie that much smaller for everyone else.
I appreciate that. And I know so many folks who might not know what Sassy is, but do know what RIDE is. I think it's a hugely successful program. So I just think that's awesome. So the other question was going to the data. One metric I didn't see on there, which is totally fine if it wasn't pulled, but was around housing and how, when I've gone out and talked to people at their homes, that's one of the biggest issues I hear about from folks not being able to step down, all the variety of housing issues that our older adults face. Did you see any patterns there, or was that something that you talked about or not in this survey?
Actually, it was the lowest score that Los Gatos received. It was a 24 out of 100 on the community score. We did talk a lot about that when we did the road mapping, and so I left it off of that because it's something that I think you all are really dealing with quite a bit. It's at the top of mind for everyone here. So I chose stuff that wasn't quite as on the top of the pile, so to speak. But absolutely, housing was the biggest thing that needed to be addressed. That and access to information about where to find senior services. Those were the two lowest scores that the town received. And so we certainly see that that's one of the biggest ones. And that does go in tandem with people's ability to maintain their home as they get older, what to do with all of that land and property and so on. So there's a lot of unresolved questions there. So that certainly was the top thing on the front of mind for older adults.
Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful and unfortunately not terribly surprising. So thank you. That's super informative.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just, again, want to thank you. I know that you have a receptive audience here. We appreciate the work that you've been doing for years and bringing this forward and moving it onward. I mean, when I look at the West Valley program, I had heard about it. What I didn't realize was the other prong in terms of getting young people into programs, into certification programs for caregiving, because I do know that there are people in this town that struggle with trying to find caregivers. I also know that the senior communities, assisted living, struggle with having enough employees. And so to the extent that we can fill that, because we're just going to have more and more demand. So in that program, are the students kind of matched up with caregiving facilities, or are there, with that certification, is there then a pathway to employment?
Thank you so much for that question. Absolutely. That was one of the things that we needed to build in order to make it a valid idea by our criteria. We need to have end-to-end. And so SASE as the model, this is a pilot program, so it's an environment where we test it and learn to see what the model can do. SASE is actually going to be one of the sites that students can get internships and employment opportunities post-certification. It'll also be a skills learning lab for 4-credit classes through the certificate program. The organizations that have signed up to be a part of the advisory boards for the certificate programs are all employers of caregivers. And so they will all commit as a part of an advisory board membership to employing folks that come out with this certificate. What we're working on now is trying to get them to commit to a $30 an hour starting wage for the caregivers that come and get this certification. SASE is already committed to doing so. Everyone that works at SASE, minimum wage starts at $30, and that's to kind of show that there's value for people who do this work. It's incredibly hard, challenging, and difficult, and people don't always see the vertical pathways for them to grow in that field, and so there's a lot of burnout and turnover. That doesn't help any of us. So that is definitely a key part of this project, is to address that question.
Excellent, thank you. I know I'll be referring people to this program. Vice Mayor.
I have to comment as well. So we're talking about education. A big A+ for your presentation and all you do for our community, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, have a good evening. Thank you all.
You too. All right. With that, I'm going to move to council matter. Oh, no, I'm sorry, our closed session report. I'll turn to our town attorney for a closed session report, please.
Thank you. The Town Council met in closed session to discuss labor negotiations for the groups listed on the special meeting agenda, and there's no final action to report.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move to council matters. So this is the time of the meeting when all the town council members who are involved in a variety of other meetings, activities, outreach between council meetings, report out on items of interest to the community. So since our last meeting, I'll be asking for an update from Vice Mayor Badami.
Thank you. On November 8th, I attended a ribbon cutting for the grand opening of the Safeway store located on North Santa Cruz Ave. The interior layout has been redesigned with expanded offerings, stepping up their game for groceries. I don't know if anybody's been buying their Thanksgiving goodies there, but it's beautiful. And it was very well attended, and I learned a lot about the employees and heard some very good stories. On November 13th, I attended the Los Gatos Rec annual senior Thanksgiving luncheon, which was well attended with sellout crowds. And I've also corresponded with residents regarding the status and progress of our housing element.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. Along with the mayor, I met with a number of residents at Alberta Way from a couple of the communities there to discuss the development, the pending development there, and to get some perspectives on it. Of course, my mind is completely open until we get that as an actual application before the council. I was not expressing any particular views on it at that meeting, but basically listening to the community about the kind of concerns they had about safety and access, and how the new development proposal differs from the one that was approved a couple of years ago when I was on the Planning Commission. On the 13th of November, I met with members of the Community Center Committee of the Older Adults Thrive Foundation, and met with them to discuss some upcoming visits to various other community centers. I also on the 13th, I met with a real estate developer and real estate agent regarding some ideas about different methods of financing affordable housing that are things we may want to consider. On the 14th, I met with the Initiatives and Publicity Committee of the Older Adults Thrive Foundation, where they brainstormed a series of ideas that could really benefit our older adults. And then on the 16th, I met with the Older Adults Thrive leadership team and board. And then I met with Tyler Taylor to discuss some needs of some of our particular service providers in town. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. First, happy early Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope everyone in this room and listening online gets a well-deserved time off with their friends and family. So this past weekend, I was in Sacramento for the California Democratic Party convention. I serve as an elected delegate. This is outside of my role as a council member, but I serve as an elected delegate and represent Los Gatos, Santa Cruz, and parts of San Jose. And the big thing that came out of that was that there will not be an endorsement for the United States Senate race. So that's very interesting. And if you all haven't heard much about that yet, there is a Senate race in the state of California to replace Dianne Feinstein. The other piece of sort of electoral news is that our Congresswoman Anna Eshoo is not seeking re-election. She announced that today, which is a big piece of news. And I actually worked for Congresswoman Anna Eshoo in her Capitol office, and you know, she served in Congress for 30 years and really was someone of character and integrity and really served with grace that I think is very important and much needed in our politics today. So there's going to be a race for who represents Los Gatos in Congress, which hasn't happened for 30 years. So pay attention to that and make sure you vote in March in the primary because that's a big deal, especially if this person might serve for another 30 years. I held my councilmember community coffee at Mandala Tea House, which is located inside of Breathe Together Yoga. If you've never been there, it's like the coolest, cutest little spot. It's a small little tea house. They make all their stuff in-house, and it's just super good. And that was a great way to start my Veterans Day weekend. And I talked with residents about difficult international issues, ways to get more involved in the town, which several people were really interested in, which was good timing with our commission applications. The concept of co-op housing. There's a little bit of, I talked to somebody who lives in co-op housing in the town of Los Gatos, which I had no idea we had any. The housing element and some other topics as well. I visited Centerpiece, which is a new small business selling flowers and more, which is being run by Catherine Summers, who was the former executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. And if you haven't gone yet, they just opened, I think, last week. And it's a great spot, really unique flowers that she's sourcing from local farmers from Santa Cruz and in Davenport. It's a really neat place, so definitely worth checking out. Timely with the Sassy presentation, I attended the grand opening of the new West Valley Visual Arts Building, which is a really, really exciting, ad for West Valley College. And whenever I'm at West Valley College or participating in anything with West Valley College, I always make sure to say that West Valley College is Los Gatos' most local community college or college of any kind. So I feel a real affinity towards West Valley, and I think they're doing so much good stuff there. If you haven't been to West Valley in a little while, it's definitely worth visiting. The campus has changed a lot just in the past few years, and they're really focusing on growing that college into being a more comprehensive, institution, and it's super exciting. It's really exciting what's going on there right now. I attended a heart screening in Campbell, but served a lot of Los Gatos High School students for screening heart issues and hearts, and I had a West Valley Sanitation District meeting, which was uneventful. So that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. On November 8th, the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board met. If you recall, I was one of the 3 members of the CEO search committee, and we had chosen somebody, but I couldn't announce it last time, and now it has been made public, and the board has voted on it, and we've appointed Monica Padilla as our new CEO. There's going to be about a three-plus month where both her and the existing CEO are going to be there as we, work together to get her trained all the way up to be CEO. But I can tell you, from interviewing other candidates, she was by far the best candidate that was prepared all across all pieces of the business. So very excited to announce that, and she's also an internal candidate. She's been our COO for a while now. So it's good to be able to promote internally, but she was actually the best candidate, thanks to our CEO, who's been teaching her the other parts of the business that wasn't, where she grew up from, basically. So very excited. We're going to have a very good CEO replacing our retiring CEO at Silicon Valley Clean Energy. On 11/9, I chaired the VTA PAC meeting. An item of significance was we did vote to approve the staff recommendation to move the grant funds from Los Gatos' Winchester project to the Kennedy Road project as we had requested. There was some discussion. There was the council member from Montessorino was asking how we could move something from a project that had part of Montessorino in it, and I ended up having to give the committee all the background of our Winchester project and how we've already put in, the Class 4 bike lanes, and it was extremely expensive to go beyond and add the sidewalks and so forth, and that it would made a lot more sense to move our money to the Kennedy Road project so we could get that done, since money for finishing the other didn't make any sense. We did get a unanimous vote, even from the council member from Montessorino, to go ahead and to recommend those funds be moved by the board. Also later that evening, the Cities Association board met. Mostly the talk was about what we did last time, approving the JPA. On 11/10, the next day, I met with Saratoga Council Member Tina Walia to discuss the idea of Saratoga asking Los Gatos to provide police services. Unfortunately, I became aware of the termination of their contract, the finishing of their contract, and the need for a renewal with the sheriff too late. They ended up voting last Wednesday to go ahead and renew their contract with the sheriff. Wasn't really enough time to figure it all out. So Councilmember Wally and I agreed that in 2.5 years we'll start the conversation again. I have thought that we can provide good services to Saratoga. It helps also to have economies of scale if our police department can serve larger community. So I will try to remember in 2.5 years that their contract is coming to an end and start the conversation again. That's it for me.
Thank you. Some of the things I attended have already been mentioned, but in this month of November, while we're thinking about Thanksgiving and gratitude, it is also the right month where we honor our veterans. And on the 8th of November, I attended the Fisher Middle School Veterans Day honoring of the veterans. And for anyone who hasn't been to it, it's a fantastic program. Both my kids did it. And so being there, seeing the 8th grade class as part of their curriculum, meets and interviews a veteran, has a conversation, puts a quote from them. Some of the quotes were really interesting, and a photo. And then there's actually a whole ceremony with the choir, with the band, and a speaker. And I was honored not only to speak there, but on behalf of the council, gave a commendation to Fisher Middle School for this program to honor our veterans, as well as to the Daughters of the American Revolution, which this year stepped in and did all the hospitality and the setup. And it's a really beautiful event. It's open to the public, and so I would encourage you to follow and think about going to it next year. I attended the Los Gatos Saratoga Thanksgiving lunch last week for our seniors, and there were 2 seatings, quite full. I think 75 people at each seating. The Lions and the Rec Center did an amazing job preparing the food, and Los Gatos Meats provided it. But there was music, there were great conversations, I found a Scrabble group that meets every week, and I may have to join them. But, card groups, and it was just a really beautiful way for members of our community to share an early Thanksgiving. And kind of queuing off of that, this morning I was at St. Luke's, and they had their Thanksgiving feast for our unhoused residents. And what was significant about that is it's the first time they were all able to gather indoors since before the pandemic. And so there was so much happiness there. I knew people there from St. Mary's. There's a whole bunch of people from different faith communities that come together to serve our neediest residents. And it's just really a beautiful, beautiful time to realize that everybody has something to be thankful for, and, not to be so focused on what we don't have, but what we do. I went to Fisher to meet with the Middle School Builders Club. The Kiwanis has a middle school group, and they wanted to talk about community service, tell me about the projects they were doing, and learn more about what they can do in the community. So they were excited to learn about the Youth Commission and a variety of other aspects of service, but they're already doing a lot. And, as I am always talking about, volunteers are what make our community the rich, wonderful network of people and care that we have. And so it's always inspiring to meet 6th and 7th graders who are doing this right now. I attended the West Valley Service Providers meeting that Tom Picro puts together every month, and Jackie Rose was there to talk about the EOC, and Peter Hertam was talking about CERT, and it was essentially talking about how our government and our volunteer groups work together in the case of a disaster, how it works, and looking toward how our service providers can also get support and what will they need for next steps, because we never know when that next earthquake or anything else is going to happen. So we are in good hands. We have a lot of good planning, a lot of hardworking volunteers, and anyone who's interested in joining CERT should look into that. And then last Thursday, I attended the Los Gatos Interfaith Thanksgiving service, which I've been going to over 30 years, but it's a beautiful opportunity for members of every single faith community in our town to come together. It rotates at different places of worship. And so we have our Jewish brothers and sisters, our friends from the mosque, friends from all of the other religions coming together in a non-denominational way to just share the thanks that we've got. And to me, that is the absolute best event in this entire town, is coming together just purely to share gratitude. Oh, and then one more thing, really fun. Last Friday, I got to join our building team and head to a tour at Netflix. So Netflix is doing some renovations and some work, and our building department's been really busy. They were busy when the Netflix buildings were built, and now they're busy with some of the changes, and they invited us for a tour. So that was 2 hours of getting an inside view of some really cool place to work. And with that, I'll turn to our manager for her report.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Just 3 items. First of all, we have extended the commissioner's recruitment. So please take a look at the opportunities. Applications are due on Monday, November 27th at 4 p.m. You can apply 24/7 through our website. And then on November 29th, our Planning Commission is holding a public hearing to discuss the housing element. And then on December 1st is our winter celebration. So come to Town Plaza Park from 5 to 7 for a winter celebration, which includes the tree lighting. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to throw one more thank you in. If you walk around town now, you've noticed the lights are going up, the big light fixtures out on the front lawn and in the plaza. And I just really want to give a huge shout out to our Parks and Public Works, who have been acting like elves, and in the last couple of weeks putting everything up, and now that it's lit up as we're heading into Thanksgiving, it's just really beautiful. So walking around at night, Los Gatos is looking magical. With that, I'm going to turn to verbal communications. This is the part of the meeting where any member of the public can address the council on an item that is not on the agenda, but under the purview of the council. You can have up to 3 minutes, and we take speakers from Zoom or in the room. And right now I have 1 card in the room. And so if there's anyone else who wants to speak at verbal, please get your card in. but I'll call Joseph Enns up.
Council, I'm Joseph Enns. I'm representing Friends of the Lost Gatos Creek mostly, and I deal with a lot of the homeless people. I'm probably the oldest of all of them. And my idea is keeping them positive and trying to get them interested in doing something other than sitting around doing nothing, basically. And I'm trying to serve as a role model and stay really positive. And this is, I guess I'll be like very candid about this. This came about because somebody told me to be the best I could be, who I was trying to impress, and she's a woman, So I'm being the best I can be, and a woman at my age adds 15 years to my life, or probably, And I've never been married and never really had a family, and I don't know what it is about men. They don't get married, marriage. I don't know. Why can't I have a successful marriage? And this is very, very candid and personal to say this, but why not? So I think of some of these homeless people, and they're all very talented. They're like me, with high IQs in certain areas, but we're never socialized properly. It seems to happen with people that are highly intelligent. You're just outcast and you isolate. I'm a veteran, I like to change the way I feel. And then the addiction thing it isn't necessarily alcohol or booze or anything else. It could be food or text messaging my girlfriend too much. And it's not taking care of what you should be taking care of, and you'd rather be going and doing this. So I'd like to work with Mariko Sayak, the former mayor, on the river thing and keeping it clean and keeping the garbage out of it primarily. And I'm just really feeling positive. So thank you very much. The police are doing a great job. Mr. Todd over there, and Jamie too. There's always going to be a couple bad apples. So thanks.
Thank you. I'll check with the clerk. Do we have anybody on Zoom who wants to speak at verbal communication?
There are no hands raised right now.
Okay. And seeing nobody rushing forward with a card, I will close verbal communication. And we will then move. Oh, you know what? I should have done the consent calendar first. I'm so sorry. Okay. So this is what I get for having bad handwriting. Now we'll move backward to the consent calendar. And on the consent calendar, we have 14 items. And typically, these are issues that are pretty straightforward, things that have been discussed by the council. One of the things I want to point out is that we have 4 items on consent where we had a variety of votes. This is the follow-up, and we had members of the council recused from some of these items. So I'm going to do this in a couple of steps. First of all, is there anybody who wants to speak on the consent calendar? Any one item or the whole thing? I'll open that to public comment. Do we have any hands?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, so I'll close public comment, and I'll just let my fellow council members know what I'm going to ask for is a motion to approve items 1 through 6 and 11 through 14 as one motion, and then we'll go back to items 7, 8, 9, and 10, and I'll do a roll call vote on that because it's essential we get that right. But before we do that, do we have any comments or questions or somebody wanting to pull? Councilmember Rennie.
I just want to make a comment on item 13. I don't wish to pull it, but one of the things we've been asking for as a council is efficiency improvements, and 13 is an effort by our Parks and Public Works Department to be more efficient. So I want to just appreciate them for bringing this item forward.
Thank you for that. Yes. Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. Just a comment on item 12. These are some suggestions from the policy committee to look at particularly I wanted to mention the portion of item 12 that references council policy with regard to behavior expectations. And the current policy, I believe, only applies to public sessions. And so I would suggest in the future that the policy committee look at the behavior expectations at closed sessions as well. I have no changes to the item, but I think it would be valuable to take a look at that as well.
Thank you. So with that, do I have a motion for items 1 through 6 and 11 through 14? Vice Mayor Badami.
I move to approve consent items 1 through 6 and 11 through 14.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudes?
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed, so the motion passes 5-0. Now we've got item 7. So do I have a motion on item 7? And that is the creation of the housing element overlay zone. Councilmember Hudes.
I move to approve item 7 as written.
Okay, second? Councilmember Moore? Okay, and I'll take a roll call vote because of the way these items originally were approved. So Councilmember Moore, I'm calling the question.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Badami.
I abstained as I did during the public hearing on this item.
Councilmember Rennie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so the motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. With that, we'll move to item 8. Do I have a motion? And this item, let's see. Yeah, I'm looking to see who was recused from.
I don't believe any.
No, that was
anyone
one that we all
recused.
voted on, and then the recusal start with the next two. So all of us were present on this item and had voted. So do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Moore?
Move to approve item 7. I'm sorry, item 8.
Item 8. Councilmember Rennie?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. I'll call it in roll call. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Vice Mayor?
Abstain as I did during the public hearing.
Councilmember Rennie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes?
No, for the reasons that I gave in the previous session.
The mayor votes aye. The motion passes 3-1 with one abstention. I'll now move to item 9, and in this case, the vice mayor was recused from that discussion, so I won't be calling her on this. Do we have a Councilmember Moore?
Move approval of item 9.
Councilmember Rennie?
Second.
Okay. I'll call the question. Councilmember Moore?
Aye.
Councilmember Rennie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes?
No, for the reasons that I gave in the previous session.
And the mayor votes aye, so the motion passes 3-1. Councilmember Hudes voting no with one abstention. We'll now move to item 10, where Councilmember Moore was recused for that item because of the proximity of where he lived. And I'm looking for a motion. Councilmember Rennie?
I move that we approve item 10.
All right. I'll second it. Councilmember Moore is recused. Vice Mayor Badami?
I abstain as I did on November 7th during the public hearing.
Councilmember Rennie?
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes?
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. So it passes 3-0. No one voting against with one abstention and one recusal. And with that, we've completed our consent calendar, probably the most complicated consent calendar we've ever had. I've already accidentally done verbal communications. You know what? I only have one more meeting. I'm going to get it right at the next one. And with that, we'll move to other business. We'll go to item 15, and our Assistant Town Manager, Nomura, will be giving the report.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Katie Nomura, Assistant Town Manager, here to talk about interim community center next steps and just to get more clarity after the motion that was made. So on August 15th, 2023, Council, we can go to the next slide, thanks. Sorry, I'm not used to the... on August 15th, Council allocated $866,281 to a community center development fund. So this was to provide a space for a variety of nonprofits, to provide services to the community, and also to potentially reconfigure the space so that we can provide better services to adults and make it more inviting, things of that nature. And so this was this conversation, we just wanted to come back for just to kind of lay out what we were thinking and just to get more clarity so that when we move forward, we can make sure we return with something that is under everyone's or within everyone's expectations. Next slide, please. Great. And so since 2020, we've had various improvements and repairs to the Adult Recreation Center, which is now also kind of a / community center moving forward. And so there are also anticipated needs that are yet unfunded that come to a total of $845,000. This is just background information. Next slide, please. And so some considerations as we move forward in kind of creating this interim community center. And I just want to point out that a full remodel of the Adult Recreation Center into a community center would be a multi-million-dollar project, and it would need to be something that is considered as part of the whole capital improvement program, and it's a longer term effort. And so right now, we are recommending that any large investments be reserved for that full remodel to ensure that, everything is planned holistically and that we are efficiently using our resources. So rather than, let's just upgrade this portion and throw a lot of resources into it, and then later down the road, we're going to potentially redo the entire building, we don't want that investment to go to waste. And so this is just something to be mindful of. Of course, it's up to council what we move forward with. And so because of this, we are recommending that the interim community center focus on near-term improvements, not large investments. And we will be seeking input at a community convening as directed by council with the various partners and organizations mentioned at the August 15th meeting. We plan to host this as a CHSSC meeting so that they can all participate and be part of that conversation. And I have some next steps as well to show you. And something else to consider for these physical improvements, that it may depend on which community partners end up using the space. Because depending on what their needs might be, we would like to know what those are and see if that can be accommodated or not. Next slide, please. The other piece of this is, while the physical improvements are great, we also have to think of the operational considerations. And so bringing in community partners, we have to consider, will the town subsidize that space, or will we pay for that space? Will we ask community partners to pay for that space? So this is something that, if the council wishes to weigh in on this at this time, that's great. There will be other opportunities as well as we get closer to what will be an RFP, a request for proposals for community partners. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happening. So we will have to do an RFP for community partners to make sure it's fair and everyone has a chance, because we don't know the scope of all who is out there who may want to provide services. However, we do want to get an idea of what community partners the community is interested in, and also what selection criteria we should be thinking about when we choose those community partners as part of the RFP. So we will solicit input for that specifically as well at the convening, and we will also return to council to solidify what that selection criteria will be. Next slide, please. And so as our next steps, like I mentioned, we're going to host a convening, and we're going to get input on preferred types of community partners and services, community partner selection criteria, ideas for near-term improvements to the ARC/community center. Then we will receive a recommendation from the CHSSC based on all of that input on items relevant to the RFP, so such as the criteria, what types of partners and services we are looking at, and we'll bring that recommendation to council to solidify what those will be for the RFP. And then we will issue the RFP, and we will return to council with the results of that RFP. Next slide, please. And then we'll, like I said, based on who is selected, we might have to have some conversations about what space requirements they're thinking of and what may be necessary. And so we will have those conversations at the staff level and then bring forward an item for the CHSSC to make a recommendation on near-term improvements and operational support. This will be taking into account ideas that were brought up at the convening. And then after that, we will bring the CHSSC's recommendation to council. We are going to target spring of 2024. This is a lot to get done and a lot of stops of different commissions and council. So I can't promise, and it might vary, but that's the goal. And then at that point, assuming there are more items than there is funding, we would probably ask council to do some prioritization. And then based on the prioritized items, we would have an architect cost those out for us and then return to council for kind of a final go ahead of what items we should bring forward for design and bidding. And so this is the next steps over the next several months. Right now, we're at this very beginning stage. And we're just here to make sure that this plan of action seems appropriate or if we're missing anything, and we're happy to take any input at this time. And I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudes and then Councilmember Rennie.
Thank you. So kind of going back to the background of the August 15th action that the council took, what I'm having a little trouble with is understanding. I don't recall repositioning the adult recreation center as a community center, and we're calling it an interim community center. I'm wondering, did that emerge from meetings with the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, or from the Older Adults Thrive Foundation, or from SASE? Because it seems to be a bit of a departure from what the council recommendation was.
So I'll look up the minutes exactly. The interim community center was not something that was said verbatim, but kind of based on the near-term improvement ideas. That's kind of, we're trying to distinguish so that we don't confuse the community on what we're talking about, that this is kind of these near-term intermediary solutions versus we're not seeking input on the whole full-fledged remodel at this point in time. But I will pull up the minutes and double check.
And as Katie is doing that, there was an attachment from council members Moore and Hudes that talked about the vision for a community center with multiple providers. So that is the notion, and I believe in that attachment were the words community center, kind of to repurpose the building in the near term towards a community center. I don't have it with me this evening, but I recall that those were the words in the attachment.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rennie?
What I'm struggling with, and how to make this a question, but you're talking about renting space to community partners. My understanding is LGS Rec already rents space to community partners. So what I'm really trying to understand is what's different and the second part of the question is there really any space for many community partners after all the operations that LGS Rec has there? And are we thinking of clawing back some space and then charging them less rent? Well, we don't charge them much rent anyway, but I'm a little bit lost in this whole idea of how this is any different than what's happening now.
Sure. And just to revisit the prior question, so the community center idea came from the naming of the Community Center Development Fund, which was in the motion. And so that's where kind of that language came from. But to answer your question, I think, LGS Recreation currently leases the building from the town in entirety. So that is something we would need to work out in terms of, which is what poses this question. Because there is an option where the community partners themselves could work with LGS Recreation under their current process to rent space, as you're saying. That would imply, though, that the community partners are paying, and we weren't sure if that was the intent of council or what the intent was. I think the nuance here is that this is a program where the town is initiating, we want these partners to have a space here, which is a little different than what LGS Recreation has the liberty to do now, where they can pick and choose and work with partners as they see fit, where this is going to be a request of the town with very specific partners in mind.
Okay, I think I understand the difference, and perhaps they will speak during community public input.
And if I may, Mayor, the motion did say create an effort to design and construct the adult recreation facility to provide space for a variety of nonprofit agencies to provide services to the community. So hence the community center concept.
Thank you. I'll go to the Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you, Ms. Nomura, for the presentation. I just want to make sure I understand this physical space, that we're talking about 2 desk spaces near the front entrance that's 45 square feet, and then a small meeting room that's 130 square feet, and then another, so for a total of 175 square feet for our community partners?
So there's not a lot of available space to be had without impacting their existing operations. And even that space in and of itself may change over time depending on when we actually implement, how we figure out how many partners we have. We do think that there is a good opportunity for having some sort of rotation between partners, of maybe on Mondays from certain times, we'll have a partner. And then so, having 2 desk spaces is something that I think is workable depending on what we come out with the RFP. But that said, those spaces may or may not be available as we move along in this process. And so we really do need to kind of work very closely with LGS Recreation to see what will be available in the end. Again, that's also part of upcoming conversations that we can have once we kind of know what the needs really are and what, do they want or even need to be there 5 days a week, things of that nature. And there may be other spaces available as time goes on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thank you. And coming back to Councilmember Rennie's question about, what's different, I go back to the lease agreement of 2005 and then the 2009 exhibit that was updated, and those are still in effect, is that correct? Yes. So, in there is the requirement that space be made available to outside agencies that serve older adults. And one of the things in there that I'll read is in Exhibit E, there's a Category 1, which is for government agencies, community service organizations serving Los Gatos senior citizens, and neighborhood center tenants, no charge for any room, as compared to other community service groups that are nonprofit, where there is a small charge of $10 to $30 per hour, depending on the room. So if that's still in effect, then I'm a little confused by the proposal in the staff report to make a change to that requirement. That I believe under that lease agreement, that space was meant to be shared with some outside service providers, coordinated by Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation. Is that correct?
Can you share with me where in the lease you're reading that?
Exhibit D and Exhibit E, the first paragraph of each of those. I'm sorry, in Exhibit D, it's paragraph, it's Category 1 and it's B under there. And then that's where it says the neighborhood, it was still called the Downtown Neighborhood Center, may be reserved by the categories of users listed below. And then beyond that, it talks about what fees would be charged for using that facility, and I would think that that would still apply.
I think in the sense of fees, and maybe that's a discussion that we can have. I don't have the history of all the nuances of this lease as when it was formed, but I anticipate that this is related to very specific spaces in the center, and it may not be spaces that are meant for kind of this ongoing operational purpose. And so I suppose we could also work with them to see, well, what spaces do you rent out, and see if that is an option and if those are viable spaces.
Just one quick follow-up.
Sure.
So in preparing this recommendation, were there meetings with the Community Health and Senior Services Commission or some of these other groups to formulate these next steps and ideas that were brought forward?
So not for formulating the next steps. This is really kind of the process. It took us a little bit to kind of wrap our heads around what will need to happen in order for us to do this, and what stops do we need to make sure we get all of the input from the community and from the CHSSC and the council. And so in working and in our conversations with LGS Recreation, and this is how we've arrived at where we wanted to make sure we clarify with council that this was kind of the expectation before we spent commission time and all these other efforts.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Rennie.
I can't recall. Is there an elevator in this building? Okay, because
yes.
The reason I asked that is, it seems like the senior focused activities and rooms are downstairs, and I think you're targeting I think Vice Mayor mentioned losing a conference room downstairs, which is, I know, one of the game rooms where seniors meet. So if we gave that away to a provider, I wanted to make sure that upstairs rooms then could become available. I think it's a trade-off. I guess how much of this have you discussed with LGS Rec to make sure it makes sense?
At this point, we've only had really initial conversations just to kind of get the ball rolling and kind of get an understanding of how we are going to kind of build this house together. We're kind of building it as we're going. So this is very initial conversation. So again, even what you're seeing here in terms of, the 2 desk spaces, a conference room, that may change over time. And as we kind of figure out what exactly this looks like in the longer term, and what LGS Recreation has available that won't impact their existing services, or perhaps maybe that is something we want to explore if there is any possibility of reshuffling.
And maybe a follow-on. So we're starting the ADA bathroom, I think, next week or something like that. Is it going to take up more space, or is something going to be lost as this bathroom is added?
I will defer to our Public Works Department.
Is it going to take part of the large room, maybe?
I do think, I'm actually going to have to look at the director of LGS Rec, because I do think it does shift some things and takes a portion of a room, but I honestly would have to verify that and pull out the plans to check.
Again, I'm trying to fit this all into where we're trying to steal space from, and are we already stealing space from those same rooms for the bathrooms?
And just to verbalize, I am seeing some nodding, so it likely is taking up some additional space.
Okay, do we have any other questions before we move to public comment? At the moment, I only have one card from anyone in the room, so I will call on Tom P. Crow.
Good evening. Maybe I'll hear from some of my colleagues before the public comment is over. But thank you for the detailed desk report. And I am very excited. I'm representing myself here, but I'm president of the new Foundation for Older Adults to Thrive in Los Gatos. And we're very excited, all of the board now, about this option to do some intermediate work. We think that there are many things that could be due to this much older building, but we'd like you to take one or two steps back and think about your guidance to the town in terms of what's the value added to our community. I think this is, above all, the most essential thing to think about, and I think that comes from a perspective of also being very conscientious of how much things cost. So that I would like to characterize this as two upgrades. One upgrade being for the community service providers, where you would have a room, you have facilities. Of course, you would do this in terms of modern tech work, just like my daughter, where you rotate in and out of desks all the time, and you spend certain days there. A provider, West Valley Community Service, might be there on Friday, another one on Monday, so forth. And also on the second upgrade, I would like to really emphasize a community center room for meetings that would comply with the exciting things we've seen at places like Los Altos Community Center, where you have electronic communications, where you have a very, you can have hybrid meetings, so you can have socialization in meetings of all sorts, and educational and social and other, where people who may be homebound or may not be able to come into the center can also participate with microphones from the city, where you can actually do this and hear and not have feedback everywhere. So I would say that these two things have been well informed by the Senior Services Roadmap work and by the surveys that Tyler Taylor referred to, and I think would be a great value. I would suggest that you think of these like a taste to the community of what could be if we had a community center. Just a few things that we could really enhance, do better, do more. So please think about it from this point of view. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question for you, Councilmember Rennie. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Percrow, I guess I want to ask the question: have you talked to the providers, and are they willing to be there? Do they want to be there? And the reason I ask that is, I actually go to the center quite frequently. I'm there 2 to 3 times a week, actually, and there's not a lot of space that's left over downstairs. I mean, and we're talking about taking space away, and I'd hate to give a space for providers if most of the time nobody even uses it, because you know the little conference rooms are there. There's either somebody playing banjo with a couple other people, or they're playing mahjong, or they're playing something. So a lot of the rooms are used a lot of the time. Where the 2 offices are, I see it's convenient for the people that work in those, not the front desk office, the other office, to be close to running into whatever the operation is that's going on in the large room. So the way I see things running, I don't think there's a lot of excess space. And so if we're going to take some of that away, I want to make sure that it's getting used. So the question is, have you talked to these providers and that they're actually going to show up and use this space, or is that just a dream that we're having? Sorry if I put it that way.
Thank you. Those are very good points, Council Member. And you embedded really 2 questions in that. And first, for example, I've heard from West Valley Community Services that they could provide additional services for our people in Los Gatos. You know, they serve the full West Valley. If they had a place where someone could sit, you know, maybe a half a day this day and maybe a half day that day or something, not all the time. And, you know, I send out this for our West Valley services. We have some 40 or 50 providers, and new ones are coming and going all the time, are appearing all the time. And I do believe that we would find some services, and you're aware also of things like, which now the LGS Rec does with some of the space they have, and I think we could enhance, such as services provided through SourceWise and through the county and through others, AAA, through ARP where they can come in and you can get classes, you can get certain things. And so I think all those things you would try and enhance. That's the first part of your question. The second one you asked, the second one was, is there space? And I have to say I was privileged to have an excellent tour of the facility earlier today by the executive director, Nancy Roulette. And I've been there many times. As we went downstairs and then upstairs, there are rooms there, and I think in a repurposing way that we could make available space. And so I'm a little worried about keep saying, well, we don't have enough space and we can't really do this and all. I think a tour of the council members individually or whatever would be a very valuable thing. I certainly learned a lot today, and it opened my eyes to some options here that I think would answer some of the important questions you've raised.
And I'm decently familiar with the facility. It's just my concern is all the focus on the downstairs space, and that's why I asked about the elevator.
Yeah,
also.
And there are a couple of rooms upstairs which really opened my eyes to other options. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next card is Jeffrey Blum.
Hello all, Jeffrey Blum. I'm on the Community Health and Senior Services Commission, currently serving as chair. I didn't plan on making any comments, but after listening to the presentation, I want to express some of my concerns. You know, the report that I just heard sounds a little broad. Our commission has a lot of stuff on its plate already. And I heard a tight timeline, spring of 2024. If we're going to review this, our commission, and by the way, I'm speaking on my own behalf, not on behalf of the commission. But if we're going to be doing this, I think we need a little more direction. I think we need a little more access to information, documentation. We should be able to talk to staff at LGS Rec, certainly any partners, and of course we can go and inspect the property. But I'm just, from what I've heard, I'm really concerned about us being able to come back and give the town council something that is worthwhile. So I just want to express my concern about that. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, the other thing is I would like some clarification. My understanding was that this money was to go toward upgrades, not toward maintenance. And looking at this staff report, it looks like a lot of the items on that list for expenditures are $845,000. A lot of those are maintenance. That's not what I understood was going to occur when this resolution was passed in August. There were a couple of items that were really front and center, getting partners, older adults partners in there, and also making the space available for hybrid meetings. And so if $845,000 goes toward maintenance, well, you know, what's left? So we need more clarification if we're going to do this. And so I hope we will get that from staff or from the town council. We need more direction. We want to know, we need to know what exactly you want us to do. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think that's the point of tonight's meeting is we'll be working on direction. Thank you. I have a card from Nancy Roulette.
Good evening, Mayor Risto and council members. I wasn't planning on speaking this evening, but I thought I might lend a few comments to augment what Tom Pickro shared and also answer any questions you may have. We fully recognize that the lease has provision for sharing that space with other partners. We're eager to do that and certainly take council direction to support in any manner that we can. To clarify on the ADA compliant restroom, it is using what was a very small office space that then got repurposed as a break room for staff and a place for us to store some of the excess food that is used to support some of the large scale operations. So a portion of that will be peeled off for a single stall ADA compliant, and then the remaining space will just be converted into a very small break room. So it has a minimal impact on our staff. I will mention that upstairs we do have instructional spaces. We have 3 of them. 2 of them are fully utilized on a regular basis, and it does include seniors. So we have access through the elevator and the stairs, and it's rooms 214 and 206. There is a space across from space 206 that's going to need some modification or some maintenance in order to repurpose it as a space for third-party providers. If I had to guess, it's probably 20 by 20. So it's pretty a significant space. It could be used for a large group setting, but it's going to need to have some maintenance and remediation done before it could be used. We're currently not using it. But the other spaces are instructional spaces, and they're used quite regularly. So the whole building is fairly well utilized. But again, with council direction, if we need to repurpose spaces, we're happy to do that.
Looks like we have some questions. Councilmember Rennie, Councilmember Hudes.
This is going to be an odd question. So one of the items staff has is $400,000, half of what we'd already allocated to an ADA compliant parking lot. And when I go there, what I constantly hear is we need more parking spaces. I get a ticket if I park over by the library and stay too long. Every Wednesday we have bridge where there's 12 or 13 sets of 4, no, probably almost 15 sets of 4 people, right? So that's a lot of people to park there. My concern is, the first thing I think about is ADA compliant means lots more space. We start losing parking spaces. And so I know we want to help people, but I don't want to just make it worse if we aren't having ADA problems. And I'm wondering if you're hearing about any ADA problems. There's laws that say we must be ADA compliant, but I really want to do what's best for our customers, or whatever we want, users, for example. And if we lose spaces and people are still just the same amount of accessibility because we've complied, but we haven't actually made anything more accessible because they aren't problems, we're losing in the deal. So I was hoping to get any thoughts you had on that.
I have lots of thoughts on this, and in fairness, I should also defer some of this questioning to Parks and Public Works, as they are the ones who put out the RFP and put together the very thoughtful plan around the parking situation. One of the unintended consequences of having over 804 members currently is that we do have a parking problem, and it's a challenge to get in and out of the building. I think the biggest issue is that the approach to walking up to the entrance is very uneven, and I think we could do a better job of improving that, but that's not within the scope of this larger project having to do with the ADA compliance for the parking. So it is a consideration. We probably need to improve lighting. We need to have better cameras. That doesn't add parking spaces. So my focus is how are they safely getting into the building. The ADA compliant factor of the parking probably should be addressed by Parks and Public Works.
Okay, so then when we're done, we'll go back to that question to staff. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Roulette, for coming and speaking tonight, and also I was able to be part of a tour there as well, and it was really enlightening to kind of see the whole picture and see that there was a significant room that could not be used because of maintenance issues. And first of all, I want to thank you for what you're doing with the program and your ability to go and get some funding for the 55 Plus program. It was, I think, really a breakthrough to be able to do that, to continue that program. I guess I want to be, I know you want to be polite, and but I observed not only today, but at some other times, significant maintenance issues with that building. And, are there some issues that have remained for a long time with, the plumbing or the systems or leaks or things like that in that building? I know you want to be gracious as the leaseholder, but I think it's important that we understand, what we're dealing with.
It's an older building, and I think it requires ongoing maintenance. And we do have some issues having to do with plumbing, the size of the plumbing, and the pipes that are running throughout the building and underneath concrete slab. And then, so dealing with those, and also some moisture intrusion, water intrusion issues that probably need to be remediated before you can really make a meaningful difference with some of the other changes that are being proposed. So yes, there are some ongoing maintenance issues that need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore? Oh, you're
Thank
not
you,
done
Mayor.
yet.
And I don't think this is a question of you, but just to clarify, because we're talking a lot about this background sheet with the maintenance costs, a question of staff, that's just background, right? That's not, and to clarify for the chair, I don't think that the idea is that we're going to spend the whole 800 here, right? There might be some maintenance thing that we decide is integral for the update, for the community center idea, but this is just background, that these are other things that are going to need to be taken care of.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, I want to thank you as well. And I appreciate the tour I got, being able to look at all the space. I've been in the Adult Rec Center multiple times, but not been able to see every single space. So that was helpful. I think as we go through this iterative process and, look at each step, I'm hoping that you'll be involved with talking, if somebody suddenly says, we're going to set up 8 offices to rent out, I know that this space is incredibly well used. So I think we're going to need your input along the way in terms of what's practical, what spaces are available, and, as you showed me, some spaces where maybe it could be shared or something else. But could you address that?
I'm happy to collaborate and take direction and also evaluate what the trade-offs would be. I will tell you from a recreation planning perspective, we're usually planning out 6 months in advance. We're just wrapping up winter, spring. We're taking a look at what our summer offering is. So to the extent possible, if you're able to give a preview of what you might need or want, it'll help us to gauge what we use for instructional space.
Perfect. I don't see any other hands raised, so thank you so much. Thank you for coming forward and addressing us. And I have one more speaker card here for Danis. No? Okay. Thank you. And I'm going to now check, is anyone on Zoom?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. So with that, I will close public comment on this item and turn to council members for questions and discussion. Council Member Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you very much for bringing this to us. I think this is really helpful, and I think is giving both us and the community a lot of clarity. So to go through a couple different things, I first wanted to address Mr. Percrow's comment. I disagree with nothing. I think that was perfectly stated about, some of the things I wrote down are, making sure there's real value add here, which is bringing in partners and creating, getting access to services that don't exist today or bolstering the services that do exist today. I think that part is going to be really integral. And I liked how Mr. Percrow, phrased it of this is kind of a taste or a test for the community of what is this more fundamental community center in the next 10 years perhaps going to look like, and not that this is not that the purpose of this is to test out these ideas necessarily, but I think it's there will be a good synergy between seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. To Councilmember Rennie, I've talked with a number of the providers we've talked about, and there's definite interest from a variety of, I could look at 4 nonprofits here on my little list. So I think there's definite interest. I think the idea that's sort of floating around of the rotational space, I think will be a good one. I think that makes a lot of sense to have, if West Valley Community Service is in there 2 days a week, and then you have, Cassie in there 1 day a week, Sassy in there another day a week, and you kind of work that out with whoever comes out in the RFP. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And then I think the thought on putting some money into upgrading maintaining the room that is currently less than usable, I think would be perfect, because that does, I think that, put some money that we have into an important facility that's, that needs to be done regardless, but it can also, that could be, one, if we have 2 spaces in there for service providers, that's a great spot for one of them. Just to kind of go through some things. So I really appreciated the addendum that kind of laid out the steps. I thought that was super helpful. I thought that was added a ton of clarity, answered my questions on process, and I think that's the right way to do it. I don't have any critiques on that. I think that makes a lot of sense. The one thing I'll say, to address one thing in the staff report, and I have some other thoughts, but I'll let my other council members continue, is the spending $20 or $30 or $40,000 for wayfinding. I'm not sure that's like my very top priority, but I think if that comes out after conversations with LGS Rec and CHSSC, that's totally fine. But I think some of these other ideas, and again, another good idea from Mr. Picrow of enhancing a community room to be more of a hybrid meeting space, that's going to be really, I think part of the idea here is to make this space really opened up to the community. And so I think with that, when you start to talk about the really high level of physical upgrades, the part of what the memo that Councilmember Hudis and I put together, a big part of it was, and the senior roadmap, was making it a more welcoming space, right? A space that people feel like they have access to, they can walk into, and I think that some sort of physical upgrades to the entrance, and part of that might be the ramp and things, but also making the actual entrance into the space feel inviting, I think would be a good kind of first step there. So those are my comments for now.
Thank you. Councilmember Rennie.
So let me go to Commissioner Blum's comments, because that's the first thing that hit me when I looked at this. I heard Councilmember Hughes and what I heard from Councilmember Hughes and Councilmember Moore was we wanted to allocate the last of our ARPA funds for something that makes a difference. And then when I saw all of the funds going to maintenance, I'm like, well, that's really not very exciting. I thought we wanted something transformational, and I'm hearing, and I think that's part of what I think. We're going to take this to the commission to get their input. That's what I think I wanted to see from them, is their ideas on what should be transitional or transformational, shall I say, transformational. And I think you just mentioned all the. Councilmember Moore, you just mentioned all the ones that we've heard tonight. It sounds like we definitely need electronics upgrades to be able to do hybrid meetings or other things to make that work better. I know I've gone to meetings there where everybody had their own laptop because they wanted it to be hybrid, and it was a disaster. So if those kind of meetings are going to continue, I think that is important. The other thing mentioned was let's get more providers in there, and that was some of the questions I was asking about. And thank you for providing all the positive reinforcement that is part of what we want for something transformational. And then I really thought also to make the center feel more welcoming. That was transformational to me. So again, somebody just asked the question and we got the answer. Well, these are not all meant to be spent now, but that's the way it looks, is all of our money that we allocated for something transformational is going into maintenance. And I just don't think that's what we should be doing. I'll stop at that.
I was going to go to the Vice Mayor. Did you have a quick?
I just wanted to get the clarification from staff on that. I think that I don't think any of the money right now is being spent on anything that's on that background page. Is that correct?
That's correct. It was just meant to let you know what is needed to be done, that is still unfunded. Again, all of the items that we recommend using the funds for will return to council for a decision.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
So I'd also like to see something transformational, something that we can be proud of. I'm concerned over the poor maintenance and neglect for a town-owned property. You take away the $400,000 for the ADA compliant parking lot, and you still have $300,000 for roof tune-ups, paint. That's very concerning to me. So going forward, I'm looking forward to more involvement and input from the Community Health and Senior Services Commission.
Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the comments from the public about how this space could be transformed, and also some of the things that Tyler Taylor spoke about resonated as, he talked about one of the big issues in the survey being availability of affordable mental health services, and that relates directly to the kind of providers that could come in there. And I was struck by the 38% of our 75 to 84-year-old population is struggling from depression. That's an incredible section of our population that probably would use services if they were available. And then also the comment about getting excitement and engagement with the West Valley College program by having potentially some presence there. So I think there are a lot of great ideas for services for older adults and for the community, the wider community as well. I don't think any of these would be restricted to older adults, but I do think that would be important as a priority. I'm concerned that we got a little bit off track in understanding this list of background items that really, I think, reflect on the fact that we have been deferring some maintenance, and so that some catch-up is necessary to improve the health and safety of the building, but I don't think that should be mixed in with the intention of really creating some upgrades that would address some of the ideas that came up today. So I would be interested in seeing a report on how we would catch up on maintenance as part of our operating budget in 2024. I think much of it is operating budget items. The example that I saw was a sink that hasn't worked for 7 years. I've used the restrooms there, and they're not part of the ADA upgrade, but there are issues there. So I do think that should be separated from this, and I think the appropriate time would be in our 2024 budget, and to get a good view of that. I could make a motion, if that would be helpful, to summarize some of the ideas that are here, but I don't know if that's appropriate for this item or not. But
Go ahead. I was going to weigh in with some comments, but
Yeah.
because we have a few things here. One is, first of all, I do appreciate that staff put this report together, because when the motion came forward to put $800 and some thousand into this building, I think one of the hard discussions we have to have is, I don't think anyone has a vision that this is the be-all and end-all building that we're going to keep. And I've heard from members of the public talking about, don't put too much money into this, you need to have the vision on the next thing. But, we are talking potentially order and a half of magnitude difference between fixing up this frankly, very old and very funky building. I mean, it's not just, even if we fix everything, it's a strange shape, it's a strange space. I joked that you could have a dog run or childcare in the middle because there's a windowed in place that you can't get in and out of. It's a difficult building. And so, part of this is how much money do we want to spend on a building that I think we all understand at some point we're going to demolish and build something new. That said, it's going to take a lot of money that I don't know how it'll get raised or where it's going to happen before that new center happens. And so what can we do right now to keep this building functional? And what can we do to enhance it? And I view this whole thing as an intermediary building, although for a lot of people it may be the only senior center they ever see, depending on how long it takes. So I do think that there's upgrades we need to do. I do know that, when we review our capital budget every year, we have a lot more asks than needs, and we haven't, as a council, prioritized this maintenance. So, when I look at this, some of the decisions we'll have to make is, do we tune up the roof to get 5 more years, or do we, for $5,000, or do we replace the roof for $100,000? Those are discussions we're going to have going down here, and I think we need to prioritize some of these things. I don't see any value whatsoever in allocating funds to totally do beautiful things inside and around this building if we don't have the funds to make sure that the building is solid and waterproof and mitigate the water risks, or the water damage. So I think we're going to have to do a little bit of both. I also am a little bit concerned. I mean, the parking lot, anytime you touch concrete, it costs a fortune. And anything we do to that parking lot will cost a lot. So we'll have to have that discussion of what we want to do with it. But I would say that, entering that big room from the outside is super unwelcoming. You can't get a wheelchair or a walker between parked cars. You can barely walk through the parked cars to get in that entry. So I think a lot of this is we have to look at, what is our real ultimate vision? What seems reasonable to have the services that we're talking about and some of the improved space in a building that we actually can maintain and have not be leaking water while we're putting in electronics. So I think we have to balance both of these. And I think the point of this tonight is for the council to kind of look at how we think we can make the first steps and set some priorities. And then there will be a series of meetings where we talk about it. The other thing I want to say is, personally, not wanting to have our staff take on another task, in my perfect world, we would look for groups that want to be in the rec center, but I would leave it to the able scheduling of the rec center because, as Ms. Roulette pointed out, they plan every 6 months, they know what programs they have going on, they understand the space. I don't think we want to get in there and micromanage who's going to be there for a day, who's going to be there for 2 days. I think they already do the scheduling to say, okay, this banjo class is going to be here, this class is going to be there. It would be something like that. And my really ideal thing would be they charge rent to the providers and we stay out of it, that we keep our agreement with them and that they handle this. We maybe have we have the input on what kind of groups we want and, what kind of providers we need. I think that's where we need all the input. And I don't know if we'll get there tonight, but I'm not going to be inclined to say that we should carve it out and run it as a town. I think it's much better served to be an inherent part of the senior rec center, the adult community rec center, community center. So that's kind of where I'm at, and I think we need to look at some of this list and say what would be essential right now. Because if we allocate all of the $800,000 to something else and we don't come up with the money to do the roof or fix the water damage, it won't matter. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I just felt like when the motion was made and we were moving forward with this, I want something as bright and shiny. I think the really bright, shiny thing we're ultimately going to have is an entirely new community center, but it's a giant leap to figure out how to get there. I think in between we can do a lot, but we can't do everything everyone wants. If anyone's done a remodel on their house, $800,000 doesn't go as far as you want it to. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I generally agree with what you said. I think that I think the town doing the RFP process and then handing off the providers perhaps to LGS Rec is maybe the best way to do it, but I don't know if that's the level of feedback staff is looking for. And then, yeah, I think a nominal rent to the providers is fine. I think that, we can get into talking with the numbers later and hearing about, who's coming forward, et cetera. But I agree. I think we're a good 10 years out, I think, generously from having an actual completely remodeled community center here. So I think I agree with what council members Badami and Rennie and perhaps others have said about doing something that is transformational, that the community can see and feel, and opening up that front space, I think, is a big priority that I've heard from multiple folks. But not necessarily, spending 3/4 of the money that we allocated from ARPA on these two top things that kind of nullify the purpose of the original motion. But I agree with what you said, Mayor, that the council we have very much made the decision, perhaps passively, but we've made the decision to defer maintenance on this building. So it's on the on us that it's in the position that it's in now. The one other thing I wanted to provide feedback on was the criteria. That was another piece of the memo, or the staff report. So I've heard a lot of this already, but just to sort of lay it out there, I think prioritizing serving, generally vulnerable or under-resourced or underserved community members. And so those are older adults, those are children. I think that could be, there could be childcare discussions here. I think students, middle, high school, college students, folks that are impoverished in general. And then I think that what Councilmember Hudis pointed out about mental health, I think is really, really important. I think those two metrics of mental health and housing being some of the very hardest things for older adults, I think those are also hard for everyone in the community. And so having, a mental health care provider there, a housing navigator there, folks like that, I think are going to be really integral. I think also there is the potential to serve homeless folks here, people with food insecurities. I think there's a variety of things we can see from the variety of partners that have expressed interest. And I think there's a definite need there. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudis.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of the concepts that have been put forward, including, the idea that, and it's contained in the existing lease agreement, that outside service providers would use that space, and that LGS Rec, as the master leaseholder, would manage that process with input from the Community Health and Senior Services Commission and from the foundation and all the other parties of service providers about what would be the priority there. That, I think, effort would help to define things. But I think we can envision a couple of very clear points of direction out of all of this, in addition to those comments, that I would suggest that the purpose of the short-term upgrades would be to, number one, create a rotational space that's accessible to outside service agencies serving older adults and the wider community, embracing the concept of shared space and hoteling so that they can use that facility. And number two, to remodel another space there to make it accessible to older adults, to allow for remote participation in activities, and that implies the electronics upgrade that Councilmember Rennie suggested. And those are the two things that I thought would be pretty clear direction about what I think the community and the older adults are asking for in this facility.
Thank you. And then it sounds like I mean, if we go forward with something like that, we would need some quotes. I mean, one of the thing in the steps was looking at, getting a quote back on, what would it take to turn, to make a room electronic, sensible? What would it take to, if that room has water damage, then we probably have to fix the water damage. And so I don't know if staff is looking for us to also prioritize the maintenance and the other things, or put certain things first. I realize when we get back with quotes, we can reprioritize.
I think at some point we do need to have that conversation, but for now, I think that's a little further down the road once we have a better idea of the whole plate of what is being needed.
So we can continue with the conversation. What do you need for tonight? I mean, I realize it's in the report, but to focus us, what do you exactly have to walk away with tonight from us?
This was helpful. I think this discussion and the input that you've provided gives us enough to move forward. And assuming you're comfortable with kind of our steps that we are going to be taking, then we'll proceed from here.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask council members if they have any other comments or input they want to give. Councilmember Hughes.
Yeah, just one thing. I think that, involving the CHSSC to do a convening would be helpful, and perhaps with the added direction that we've provided tonight to do that effort. I think that in particular that would be really valuable to get our community's input on what we could do, and I would also suggest that maybe we back away from the term of interim community center and focus on upgrades pretty much as been discussed tonight.
Through the mayor. So is the idea that we don't want to call it a community center, or that would just be helpful because it's kind of hard for us to kind of call it. It's a very long title of upgrades to the adult recreation center, and just, if there is some input on that, that would actually be kind of helpful.
Councilmember Moore.
So I like interim community center. I think that because Councilmember Hudis, I think your the concerns I think come from a very good place of not, we want to have a community center that is a later thing that we do. But I think in terms of this, the discussion we're having here of taste to the community and trying to, bring in partners who weren't here before, I think this kind of interim concept is helpful. I also think that kind of helps us get to the transformational change that we get to in 2 years or what have you, and all of these upgrades are made. We get to say, oh, here is the, I don't know. I like the interim community center, but I'm open to other ideas.
Thank you. I was going to say, if I could just throw in, I also feel strongly that we want to use the phrase interim community center because I don't want people to be disappointed with when we do this work that it's still not this big community center. And I also think that it can help with, okay, this is what we have. These are some improvements. And when we do the visioning for what the ultimate community center can be, this will be a launching point or a data point. Councilmember Hughes.
Yeah, I'm definitely receptive to this idea of it being interim. Where I had an issue was spending $30,000 on a sign to call it something that it really isn't. If we're really focusing on a couple of smaller upgrades that we can get done with that budget right now, I'm concerned about going the other way. And there's also, this was called the neighborhood center, and then it was called the adult rec center, and now we're going to rename it. I'm not sure that the formal renaming really is of very much value. I think getting the upgrades done is what's of the most value.
I understand what you're saying. I misunderstood. I thought you meant you didn't want us using that phrase in discussion. I mean, heck, when it gets down to what we can do to make the center look more welcoming, maybe we can just put a big banner instead of creating a whole sign. But yeah, when we get down to the items, I don't think anyone's fighting for a sign at this point at that cost. Who knows? Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, I agree, and the banner might be a good idea. I think the nomenclature, part of why I think it's important to start thinking about this as an interim community center is I've shared this anecdote before, but when I first tried to use the adult recreation center, I was told that it was for only people older than 55, and I was like 20, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not an adult yet. I don't know, can't, whatever. And so I think that thinking about it as a community center or a neighborhood center, whatever. But I think the adult recreation center, especially if we're thinking about potentially serving children here or people that are under the age of 18, I think that part is important.
Vice Mayor.
Perhaps we can get some input from the Community Health and Senior Services Commission as to how to name it.
Okay, well, if we decide to do a sign, we can do that. So it sounds like we also have some interest in having the convening meeting would involve potentially there being at a Community Health and Senior Service meeting or somewhere, but open to the entire public with lots of noticing. All right, so it sounds like we've given input, staff has direction, hands are down, so I'm going to close this item, and seeing as it's 9:04, is a 11-minute break good for people? We'll reconvene at 9:15? All right, thank you. Quick break. All right, are we all set? KCAT is... And now we are going to move to item 16. So I will turn to our Parks and Public Works Director, Nicole Burnham, for a report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Nicole Burnham, Parks and Public Works Director. This item is a follow-up to discussions we've had both in May and then most recently in October regarding the town's traffic impact fee and updates to that program. So the intent of this item is to provide the final recommended fees to council, which were presented in Table 1 of the memo that's in front of you. The final recommended fees are lower than all the previous fees you've seen both in May and October. That is the result of us including accessory dwelling units in the accounting of the fee calculation. We mentioned in the memo, you had asked us to include ADUs in the fee calculation as a multifamily residential. We actually learned after, as we were doing the final fee work, that state law requires that we base the ADU fee on single-family residential. So we incorporated those into the single-family residential, which then dropped the fee for the across the board because it ripples through all the other land use categories. And then our request is that in order to adopt the fees, we need council to hold a public hearing, at which point we'll adopt the nexus study, adopt the updated fee resolution, modify the ordinance, and modify policy 1-08 to update everything regarding the traffic impact policy and fee program. And we are suggesting we'd like that hearing to be on January 16th, 2024. And with that, I will just take questions.
Thank you. And to clarify, so tonight we're reviewing and all the action will be taken when we set the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rennie and then Councilmember Moore.
So just some clarification. You did some answering of questions here, and the questions, let's see, we're on page 178 of the electronic version, which is page 3 of 6 of this staff report. It says, what is the fiscal impact of 100% credit for extremely low and very low income developments? And then the answer is the RENA calls for 537 units in the low and very low. So it's not consistent with the question. And then you answered, it would cost $6.25 million. Is that $6.25 for low and very low, or is it extremely low and very low as per the question?
I have to admit that there's an error there that I need to take a moment to reconcile, and I'll need to do some background work on that. I'm sorry I didn't notice that before.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Good catch. So we don't know if there was just the wrong word put in or if the wrong categories were counted. So we'll get back on that. Any other questions from council members?
My question was also about that, so maybe not a different thing within that, but maybe I'll let the director do some number crunching and then we can come back to that.
Right. And do you have access to that, or do we have any members of staff that are able to get that information? I see our community development director with his laptop open. Up, and I will acknowledge the community development director who's holding a microphone.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Joe Paulson, Community Development Director. I was just trying to find the categories. So actually the 537 is the very low, which would be very low and extremely low. That is the 537 units, so it probably shouldn't have said low in the staff report.
Okay, so the report is accurate, just the label, it was mislabeled, so it is actually for the extremely low and very low. Okay, so the data holds. All right. So Councilmember Rennie, did you have a follow-on to that? Okay, then I'll go to Councilmember Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that. That's helpful. I guess my question or thought here is that the 6.2 is obviously hugely substantial, and so I imagine the recommendation and what's built in here is not doing anything for the very low and extremely low. Is that correct?
I think that's a point in which we could use direction. I've started looking at modifications to the code and to the policy, and was going to write that into the policy, but we could use direction on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think the 6.2, I don't know, at least for me, is higher than I think I thought it would be or was in, and I guess that makes sense for 15%. But I think that, yeah, maybe there's a refinement there and some sort of incentive, but I don't know that taking 6.2 million out of what we end up netting is going to be what is going to be best for us.
I have a question. I mean, we're moving numbers. These are imprecise numbers in the numerator and the denominator. We don't know how many units we'll be getting, how many ADUs, et cetera. We're basing this on the cost of the projects we want based on how much housing we expect. So if, for example, we got additional units, as we get the low or very low units that would potentially be exempt from paying the fees, but if we get more market rate units than we're expecting, they will be paying the TIF, correct? If we got more housing than expected in this study, do we redistribute the cost per unit, or does each one continue to pay the fee that is associated with it?
No, each one continues to pay the fee that's associated with it. And I think that the idea of giving credit to any one kind of housing type is about trying to incentivize the construction of that particular type. And even in the same development, if there's 100 units and 20 of them are extremely low and 80 of them are market rate, the 80 are still going to pay the full market rate for that.
Right. So we're just looking at this is spelling out for us if and when we get all of these extremely low and low housing units, our decision not to charge the TIF to go with each of those units means that would be $6 million that we will not collect. But it doesn't mean that we might not collect money on other units. Because I'm looking at out of
that's correct.
The full. Okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's somewhat imprecise, but there's a significant loss for capital projects by incentivizing these low-income units, but there's also, we do want to be doing a step toward incentivizing it. So you're showing us what the financial consequences could be because we asked. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, so I'm interested in the overall financial impact of this, and so I assume that that transportation impact fees of some kind are in our 5-year forecast. Is that right?
Transportation impact fees have to be used for transportation projects, so you would see that in the capital program. So it can't be used for operating purposes. Right.
No, I understand, but so is it in our capital? Are there expectations about fees in our capital program?
Yes, there is a line item of projection for the traffic impact.
It looks like our finance director wanted to weigh in.
Good evening, Gitong Bari, Finance Director. So every time we have a minimum level of traffic impact fee just budgeted, but if staff is aware of a bigger project and we have the project application, then the staff bring forward this projection. So unless the project is ready to go, we won't have that. But PPW staff and the engineering team review those applications, and we will bring forward usually those additional expected traffic impact fee with the capital budget.
Thank you. Councilmember Hudes?
So as a follow-up, if we're making changes to our fees here, how will we know the financial impact? Where will that become visible?
So the impact will get really visible when those project gets approved and fees are collected, and the director can talk about that. Sometimes those project has to be spent around that given project. Sometimes can be spent townwide. But
if I may just say, I think the whole purpose of looking at the fees, and Director Burnham can add on, is that we've recognized that our basket of projects has changed and that our fee structure might need to change. And so that's why this item is before you. So the goal is let's modify the fee structure prior to potential new development happening, so that way when that new development does happen, we have the fee structure in place that the council is interested in. It takes a while before applications pay these fees because they have to get their planning approvals, and then the fees aren't paid until at the building permit stage. So there's going to be a lag in terms of when the fees are actually collected. But as we do our 5-year capital plan, we will do our best to estimate for capital purposes consistent with the fee structure and the Nexus study.
If I could ask a follow-on, could you, I hate to do this, but for everyone's edification, can you walk us through to how we got here? Because my understanding is we already have traffic impact fees. This is an update. And we did a Nexus study because we cannot collect fees unless we have a Nexus there. And we identified all the capital projects we thought that we believe need to be funded to deal with all of the impacts, and then are setting the fees to get that paid. So we've had multiple discussions on this. So if you can just quickly, high level, walk us through, where we were, the steps we've taken, and how we're here.
Yeah, and I can follow on and maybe grab some of what we were talking about with regard to budget projection and how that all ties together. The last update of our traffic impact fee program was done in 2014. So in 2021, there was a state law passed that requires us to update the fees every 8 years. So we were kind of due anyway because of the need for, because of the development of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, and really did shift the projects. So that work started even before I was with the town, and it continued through the last year, obviously, with identifying what is the list of projects in the universe of transportation-related improvements we need to make as a town to support future development, and then what is the projected development that would potentially need to, or that would benefit from these transportation-related improvements that we know we need to make as a community. And those two things go together to make the impact fee. What I've seen in our budget process, we do carry a nominal baseline, which of course is based on the fee that was effective in 2014. There's a baseline in the 5-year projection. Each year as we go through the budget process, just as the town manager indicated, we sit down as a department and we look at the developments that are in the pipeline that we know are going to pay into the fee. And so I think if you look at that specific line item in the budget book, you'd see in the next 1 to 2 years, a more realistic number of projections. We sit down, we look at okay, where is this development in the process and when might they pay the fees? And we try to allocate that into a fiscal year. And then we assign it out to projects from there, projected projects. But then when you get into year 4 and 5, you'll see a nominal kind of baseline amount that is just a kind of a placeholder. So, so I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Did you? Okay. Any other questions? Okay, right now I'll open it to public comment. I don't have any cards from anyone in the room. I don't see anybody rushing forward to bring me a card. I'll ask our clerk, do we have anybody on Zoom?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
I think a lot of people are on Thanksgiving vacation already. Okay, so we have no public comment. I'll close the public comment and go back to council members for discussion, a motion. Well, actually, do we need a motion? We're receiving the report. I'll turn to our town attorney.
Yes, a motion to schedule the January 16th hearing would be helpful.
Right, that would be step 2. We need that. Vice Mayor?
I'll go ahead and make that motion then. I move that we set a public hearing for January 16th of 2024 to adopt the Nexus study, adopt a resolution to establish the updated transportation impact fee, introduce an ordinance amending Article 7 of Section 15 of the Town Code, traffic impact mitigation fees, and modify Town Council Policy 1-08, transportation impact policy.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore?
Thank you. I'll second the motion, but I think there is more discussion on this, so we'll I have a few more comments, but second the motion so we can.
Okay. So your comments are related to the report. We can move forward with this motion? Or with this motion?
No,
My recommendation would be to hold off voting on the motion until the discussion has ended.
Okay. So we've got a motion and a second, and we'll hold on to that. We won't call the question, and now let's go back to discussion. Councilmember Moore.
Perfect. So, I guess I wanted to hear from the council what our thoughts are on this 100%, the low income question. I think that's a big one. But I also just wanted to comment that I really appreciate, how the mayor and the director and manager kind of walked us through this process. This made very little sense to me when we first looked at it, and now makes a lot of sense, I think. And so I'm grateful, and I think this is going to be something excellent for us. But I do think we should. I think we need to talk about what the low income credit is or not. Right now, I think the 100% for extremely low and very low is perhaps too high. So that's my thought.
Thank you. And I have a question for staff. We'll be discussing this. We will not be making any decisions, right? Or are we going to make, because we're holding the meeting in January, can we make decisions about what we're including or not including?
So what the law requires is that the Nexus study be available for public review for 30 days. And so if the council were to direct a change to the Nexus study tonight, it could be changed so long as it was available for public review for 30 days.
Would that mean that having the meeting on the 16th gives us enough time?
It does.
Mm-hmm. But I'll just clarify, the issue of credits isn't in the Nexus study. So the Nexus study is going to tells you what the maximum fees are that you can charge, and it tells you how the math works when it comes to the questions of what you choose to incentivize or how you set the fee. That's all open for discussion. So I don't even think it would necessitate a change.
Good point. Manager?
We do, though, want to bring you those ordinances and policy changes in January. So any direction you have for changing the parameters of the fee structure would be very helpful this evening. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Rennie.
So I think it was Councilmember Moore and I that were kind of pushing for zero on the very low and extremely low. I'm thinking, okay, it turned out to be a bigger number than we thought. I'm thinking maybe we give direction that maybe we want something more like a 50% reduction. And then a question, I think it's sort of rhetorical, but I believe we can, at the time we're approving a project, reduce the fees at that time if we want to further incentivize.
I probably wouldn't recommend doing that because it's supposed to be a standard fee that's applied to all the projects evenly. I mean, the town council could make the decision to subsidize fees for a project, but the Mitigation Fee Act doesn't really provide for a waiver of fees.
What's the difference between subsidizing and waiving a fee?
Waiving would mean we wouldn't collect the fee at all, and then subsidizing would mean that the town makes up the difference in the amount that was to be paid versus what the applicant actually ended up paying.
I still fail to see the difference.
So in other words, the subsidy means that the town would identify another funding source. So we would basically, for example, take money from the general fund and say, we're going to pay this developer's traffic impact fees, and it goes into the traffic impact fee revenue line. So we would...
we would restrict some of our general fund money instead. Okay, got it.
It's a transfer or whatever, but as opposed to waiving means you would not be collecting any fees for that project.
And the reason I bring that up is one of the thoughts I've been having is if we get projects coming forward that are in the low category, but we need more RENA in the very low, that we look at things like fees to try to get developers to move some of their units into the very low, but through either using our BMP fund and reducing fees such as these and other sources to provide basically incentive or pay potential developers to move units into the other categories. This is one of my thoughts for the projects coming forward, and so again, why I'm asking these questions. So going back to, I'm suggesting that we give direction to staff. We're interested in something in the 50% range instead of in the 100% range.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think the 50%, that's similar to what I was thinking. You could also, do something like 75% for ELI, 25% for VLI. But I think a question I have for staff is, that number of 6.2 million, as I'm thinking about it, that, the other 42 million seems, or I'm sorry, the money we're getting from market rate and, moderate income seems to be all but guaranteed over over a long enough time horizon. I don't know that it is for extremely low income and very low income. So I don't know if you all have thoughts on kind of if that 6.2 million is going to end up being an accurate number, if it might be, how much of an incentive doing this even is, and maybe it's a little bit moot because if we don't think they're going to get built, we're not going to get the money either way. I don't know. Do you have thoughts on the ELI? How likely?
So I'm happy to jump in.
Director.
Joel Paulson, Community Development Director. So the ELI is really going to be probably a limited portion of any affordable units that would be required. Sometimes it's enough for them to just go to the very low category. It just depends on the specific funding round for the various state and federal funds that they try to obtain. So, we did see a few in the first phase of the North 40, for instance, but most of those tended to be in the very low category.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Rennie.
I would also add, I wouldn't worry about us losing, I wouldn't worry very much about losing this $6 million because what we see, we have a whole bunch of pre-applications, and I've never seen any application that's gone beyond providing 20% below market units. If we got all of our 537 RENA built, that would mean at the 20% rate, we'd have 5 times as many units actually built. And four times would be market rate plus this one for the last 20%. So we'd end up with more market rate units built than I think we're really calculating here. When you add in also the rest of the RENA is units that are in the low and the moderate, that so in other words, if we were ever to get all those 537 built, it's likely we'd blow away the number of units total that are in this calculation anyway, and you wouldn't be short 6 million, you'd be positive.
I do want to point out something or ask staff. In terms of projects that are vested in SB 330 at this point, can you remind us they are vested to the old TIF, correct?
Yes, once SB 330 project has been deemed submitted, they're vested to all of the development standards that are in place at the time they were deemed submitted. So if they were deemed submitted prior to the traffic impact fee update taking effect, they will pay the existing traffic impact fee that's in place right now.
Okay, so this change will apply to anything coming in after January, well, when we have the meeting in January 16th, how long does it take until it takes effect?
The resolution takes effect 60 days after adoption.
Okay, so we're looking at anything that comes in after March. Okay. The other question I have is approximately how much money do we have in our BMP fund? Do we know? I mean, the reason I ask is Councilmember Rennie talked about, if we were, as a project came forward and it had ELI units and we wanted to not waive the fee but cover the fee, could we use the money from the BMP fund for that?
Thank you for the question. I believe that we could use money from that fund, and I want to say, I don't have it in front of me, but the current BMP fund has approximately $3 million in it.
Okay, so not enough to cover the $6 million, but if we did do 50% and at points we decided, look, it looks like this would incentivize it, we have a potential funding source to cover those fees to put into the TIF. Okay, I'm leaning a little away from 100% and more toward 50% wave of a reduction. Councilmember Rennie.
I think you misunderstood what I was suggesting. I wouldn't suggest taking BMP funds to finance in order to get a developer to move a unit from market rate. Let's say they come in with a bunch of ones that are in moderate, so they're just barely into the below market category. If we are trying to get them into the very low or below category, there's a delta there of the amount of revenue they're going to collect. If the town could pay them that delta, they would easily move it. Or if we paid them 75% as part of a deal or something like that. So I'm thinking of sources of dollars to get them to move units from a high level on the higher level affordabilities to the lower level affordabilities where it's tougher to get our RENA numbers filled. BMP fund is a source. Cutting fees that they have to pay is another source to make up that difference.
Okay.
Just trying to explain my thinking a little more.
Okay. So where are we with this in terms of, I mean, right now what we had was something that was looking at 100% fee reduction for very low and extremely low, and it doesn't sound like we have support for that. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. So perhaps I could make a suggestion to modify the motion to include a 50% credit for extremely low and very low income developments in the, in the proposal that's brought forward to us in January. If the maker of the motion would be amenable.
The maker of the motion accepts that.
Okay.
So we'd be talking about full fee for everybody, but at those two lowest levels, 50% fee.
Right.
So 50% fee reduction. Okay, we have a motion and a second.
I'm the seconder.
The seconder made the friendly amendment. The maker of the motion approved it, and I'm assuming because the seconder made the friendly amendment, he's going to accept it. So we have a motion and a second. Any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. The motion passes 5-0. And so now we have the meeting set for January 16th, and we have direction on what we want to do with the fee reduction. So any other housekeeping on this item? All right. Thank you very much. I'll close this item and move to item 17, which is Shannon Road. And it looks like we'll be continuing with Director Burnham.
Back. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. I'm Nicole Burnham, Parks and Public Works Director. I have a little presentation to help this conversation. Thank you. Go to the next slide. So just a refresher, we are talking about a section of Shannon Road east of the center of town. The project location is circled in red here on this graphic. Shannon Road is the blue line that's kind of moving from the top left to the bottom right of the screen. And the project location sits in between Santa Rosa Drive, which is labeled on the map, and then to the left of that, the horseshoe-shaped road is Deduca Way. And so if we go to the next slide, just to refresh everyone's memory, this is a section of road that the town acquired from the county some few years ago, and we have known for some time that it requires repair, in particular the northern lane. So on that figure you were just seeing, north was to the top. So that's the lane that's traveling into town, carrying traffic toward Los Gatos. The Public Works engineering team has been working diligently with a consultant to design improvements and coordinate the repair work that needs to be done here. That has been in progress since prior to my start with the town. This past summer, probably in part due to the rains that we had last winter, there was significant deterioration of that northbound lane that was identified to the extent that it was impacting vehicular travel of the roadway. And so we considered what our options were. And we informally considered them. We formally presented them to you with this item, but we did consider at that time whether we should implement alternating one-way traffic, which is with temporary signals, which is ultimately what is there right now. We evaluated and considered temporary repair of the road, and we considered just fully closing the road to all traffic. So we kind of did some thinking about all three of those at the time. When we were doing that evaluation and assessment in July, we were thinking that we would be in construction this fall or this spring. So the alternating one-way traffic seemed like a good solution for, the maybe 6-month window that we needed to cover. So that was what was implemented, and some of you may have seen it. There's temporary traffic signals both at Deduca and at Santa Rosa. There are barricades, there's message boards, and there's signage. Since that was implemented, we have had numerous reports of erratic driver behavior through there, people who are failing to obey the red lights and traveling through the closed. So just to be clear, so you sit at a red light at Santa Rosa while people have a green and they need to come all the way down from Deduca. So you may sit at Santa Rosa for a good 3 or 4 minutes before you get a green to move forward. Drivers have become impatient and so have proceeded on the red, which leads them to interact with someone who's coming down the hill and having to navigate how one person might back out. So we've had a number of reports of kind of behavior like that. So we wanted to explore with the council, what some of these options are, because we've also, while that has been going on, we have also noted that we are in coordination with property owners adjacent to the project site, and that coordination has been taking longer than we had anticipated. So we are not, while the design plans are complete, we're not currently in a position to bid the project and move the construction forward. So the memorandum that's in front of you and the desk item that was submitted today kind of consider those options and give you some costs. But before I jump into that, if we go to the next slide, so here's a current picture of the available funding for this project. So we had, in round numbers, $4.9 million of total budget. We've spent about $700,000 of that. We haven't spent all of it, but it's tied up in contracts with the design consultant, leaving us about $4.2 million for construction. Our current construction budget, well, $3,000 was included in one of the item 13 earlier tonight, but the construction budget is about $3.9 million. So that leaves us about $224,000 of available funding on paper. and we won't actually know what the construction costs until we get construction bids back. So wanted to provide that context of what seems to currently be available in the budget before we talk about the next slide, which is the cost of the three options that are in front of you. So we kind of took a deeper dive on those three alternatives that I talked to you. You know, we had worked through and done some back of the envelope work in August. We put some more meat on them to be able to present them to you tonight. So alternative one, which would be the existing traffic control that's in place and possibly enhancing the signage to make it clearer to drivers that there's extended wait, maybe help with some communication to make it clearer. The implementation cost of that is largely done, right? I mean, we've implemented the bulk of the cost associated with it. $33,800 was spent on the actual material that's already there on site. The cost of this alternative is an ongoing operating cost. So that equipment is being rented at a cost of $8,700 a month. So however long it takes us to work through the issues we're working through and get to bid, we need to continue to pay that. So just as a frame of reference, I made an assumption that we just hypothetically have it out there for 18 months. Hopefully it's less than that, but for the interest of conversation, we went with an 18-month assumption. The other option we looked at is an interim repair, and we discounted this in option in August because we thought we were so close to permanent construction. This would, we don't have super fully firm pricing on this, but we know about how much it would cost because we've talked to some contractors about it. And so it's in the, between the construction itself is in the $150,000 to $200,000 range, but we'd need to do traffic control to support that and notifications to the residents. That temporary repair would buy us some amount of time. We can't really be sure how much. I mean, it wouldn't be fully reconstructing the road the way we believe it needs to be. But we think it could get a year or two. So that cost ends up in the $163,000 to $213,000 range. And then the third option, which is, we could probably call it the nuclear option, is the full closure of Shannon Road, which we realize we are profoundly clear that there's a significant impact to the community associated with that option. And if we were to implement that or consider implementing it, I think there's a number of issues we need to work through, both legally as well as from an engineering perspective. So, but it is by far the lowest cost solution that we have available to us. And so we are here tonight to kind of allow, daylight this to council and have a conversation about that. I have town engineer Gary Heap here as well, so I think he'll support this conversation as well. And with that, I will turn it over for questions.
Thank you. And I do appreciate all the work you pulled together. This has been a dynamic situation from the time we inherited this road, and I think we'll have some questions about it. I don't have any cards, but we'll do the questions first. Councilmember Hudes, and then Councilmember Rennie, and then Councilmember Moore. Sorry.
Thank you. I see that the costs are scheduled out over 18 months. What is the schedule for getting the road repaired?
For the permanent repair, it is dependent on us securing the final property owner approval. So that could be, we could go to construction in the spring. It could be 18 months from now, which is why I'm kind of pushed. We're not sure is the truth at this very moment.
I mean, wouldn't it be important to tell the residents what the schedule is of the closure? And if there's something that's out of our control, what would the schedule be after that item is resolved?
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I think once the item's resolved, we're poised. I'm going to look at the town engineer because he's the one that's going to be responsible for putting it on the street. But once that issue is resolved, it should be relatively quick.
Yeah, once we go ahead and thank you, Director Burnham, Gary Heap, town engineer. Once we resolve the property owner acquisition, we're prepared to bring the project to council to request the bid, get that awarded. And then for construction, we would go to a full closure, and construction can take up to a year for that project before you can reopen the road fully.
Just a follow-up. So the construction plan does involve a full closure for a year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and then so what is the incremental full closure that's being proposed here?
The incremental full closure, if we were to look at option 3, the duration of that could be anywhere from a few months if we were to be successful with the adjacent property owner in that property acquisition, to what Director Burnham had said, up to 12 to 18 months as we work through that property acquisition. And then going into construction, you're looking at another year on top of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rennie.
So when I'm evaluating the cost between 1 and 2, my first look is 1 doesn't make sense because we'd spend another $160,000, which is what 2 costs. But then I started realizing 2, if we leave it in number 1 in place until we do number 2, we've actually added some cost to that, or is that already in there? And so the question really becomes, how quickly could you do number 2? Because the assumption might be, well, we're waiting to do number 2, we're spending money in number 1.
If we get direction from council this evening to move forward with number 2, or option 2, which would be the full closure for a few weeks and then the reconstruction, at which time we could then open the road up fully in both directions, we're looking for probably no more than 2 weeks for that construction to take place.
Yeah, but we've got to bid the project and fit it into the usually we bid these things in the winter, and then they get done sometime in the summer. And how are we going to get a faster than usual number 2 done?
So at this point, we have not yet closed out the annual paving project. We still have the contractor on board. We have not accepted that work and closed out the and made the final payment. So in talking with the contractor, Bortolato, they are willing to come back, honor the prices from this year's paving project, and do that work under this current contract.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. That's great. So 2 other questions. So just so I'm 100% clear, so the $224,000 is theoretically surplus that we would have to pay for whatever option we pursue. Is that right?
That's correct.
Perfect. And then I think I heard you sort of say no to this, but just so I'm clear, does option 2 do anything for long-term construction costs? Does that eat into is that just a total burnt $200,000, or does that do anything to help?
That would be total loss, because what we do in the reconstruction of the road is we basically demolish the entire roadway section, build retaining walls, and then reconstruct the entire roadway section.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to ask you to walk me through some of the things. So I didn't realize the construction will take an entire year. And in that time, the road will be completely closed the entire time. There's not, oh, well, PG&E does something, it'll be 1 lane or anything.
We had talked internally about a few options, but at this point we are recommending a full closure. That will actually speed up the construction timeline, because if we were to have to phase it, then you would just have a longer duration of construction.
Okay, thank you. And I think, as we're starting to understand the timelines, it starts putting a little more clarity around what makes sense. Because when I first looked at option 3, I thought, well, that's the least expensive, but, it is essentially the nuclear project option, and it's horrifically painful to close that road. But I was thinking, well, if we close the road and we can't start construction for a year, and construction takes 3 months, the road would only be closed for 3 months. If we're talking about an entire year for construction, that's going to be excruciatingly painful. And at some level, that sort of changes my measurement of how much pain, because if the road's closed for a year, 6 more months. Oh, you're right. I was thinking I did that. Okay, I won't go to where I'm going, public comment. I forgot about that. I was going to ask for a walkthrough on this. Oh, the other question I have then, and then I'll go to public comment, is for option 2, with the interim repair. Essentially, what would we be doing? Just covering up the cracks that right now, my understanding was the road wasn't unstable or about to fall down immediately, but drivers were behaving terribly because they didn't want to drive on the cracks, so they were going into oncoming traffic? Or can you talk me through why we had this problem, what this would address, and how long we think it might actually work long enough before people start diving into oncoming traffic again?
Yeah, I can start a little bit, and then town engineer can pick up. So there are actual void spaces under the asphalt right now. So if you look, if you were to walk there and look at the cracks, there are places where you can see, voids underneath. So we need to remove asphalt and then provide a base material before we pave over. And Mr. Heap can elaborate more probably and give you better technical guidance.
What the plan is and what we've discussed and what we've costed out is to look in the area of where you see the majority of the cracking, for the contractor to go in and from center line to edge of road on the north side, do a 4-inch grind of the entire section, do then base repair, void filling, to provide some kind of a stable base, and then go back with a 2/10 add. So taking down 4, adding 2, because we do not want to add additional weight to that roadway, and we want to try and lessen the weight, try and get additional life. We don't know how long it will last. We know that the county in the past, when they owned the road, their maintenance was to go out and add more asphalt, and we know what that has led to. Very thick sections of asphalt and the road kind of peeling off and falling into the ditch adjacent to it. So I can't say how long that would last, but it would certainly be a temporary fix for probably at least a year while we work through the property acquisition.
Okay, thank you. Even if we get a ton of rain this winter?
Well, the thing with if I may, thank you, good question. With the rain, that's one of the biggest concerns, because with the voids now, with the cracks now, that rain is getting into the roadway base. And that's going to then continue to accelerate the deterioration the longer we wait. If we can get out there and put a nice clean surface, a repaired surface, that'll seal all those voids and seal all the cracks and prohibit additional water from getting in.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, with that, I'll open public comment. I have no cards. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
Yes, we have one hand.
Okay, great. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. My name is Bruce Henton. I'm a 28-year resident of Los Gatos at 160 Sierra Azul, which feeds into Shannon Road via Santa Rosa Drive. Santa Rosa Drive has probably over 30 homes. Sierra Azul has 11 homes. And I speak for many neighbors who first appreciate that this matter is being discussed tonight at the council meeting, and especially want to thank the mayor, who has been responsive to me personally on my inquiries and transparent in her communications on this issue. She first alerted me on Saturday afternoon that these proposals would be discussed tonight, but I may be wrong, but to my knowledge, this was the only notice that the community was given, at least through me, that Shannon Road was on the agenda tonight. So I think if decisions were going to be made tonight, I think it would have been a good idea to include the community. As a result of lack of notice, we've had virtually no time to coalesce around the issue to present a unified front to the town council. I've personally polled a handful of neighbors and have little doubt that the consensus would be the same if we took an official poll of the most directly affected, as well as those in surrounding areas who use Shannon Road on a regular basis. Had we been given the time to use a next door poll or other means, I feel certain residents would vote overwhelmingly to keep both lanes open and sooner rather than later and without traffic lights. Please let me make a statement on each of the proposals. On proposal 1, to keep the traffic lights on Shannon, this is not a safe option near term or long term. As your own staff pointed out, not all drivers obey the red light, which can last up to 4 minutes. As a result, head-on collisions are a nightmare possibility. Your own staff has reported on accounts from residents about multiple incidents of near head-on accidents, and my own neighbors have told me their own harrowing stories of near head-on crashes. I can tell you from firsthand experience that I wince every time I drive on Shannon because I fear another car will ignore the light and speed around the curve. And if you've been on that road, you know there is absolutely no room to swerve out of the way to avoid a crash. As a bicyclist, I'd be petrified to think that a car would be coming up Shannon from Santa Rosa while I was accelerating downhill on a bike. And what would happen if an ambulance or police vehicle needed to respond to a medical or safety emergency, or if a fire engine needed to respond to a fast-moving hillside fire while waiting for this light? A few minutes can make a difference between life and death and loss of property.
Okay,
I'd invite
Bruce,
you.
I hate to interrupt you. Your time is up, but we can ask you questions. So if you'll hold tight, Councilmember Hudes has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple, but the first one was, did you have an opinion about strategy 2 and strategy 3?
Yeah, so, okay, I ran out of time, but proposal 2 is the one that the neighbors that we've spoken to would favor. It's been done many times in the past, or several times in the past. I liken it to the tree trimming removal that happens pretty often on Shannon Road to keep that road safe from trees falling on power lines and so on. The traffic light, closing the road at this point before we have the property owner agreement is just a non-starter. I think speaking for my local community, proposal 2 would be the one that we would vote for.
Thank you. Another from Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't really aware. I wonder if you were aware that the plan for the permanent construction would involve closing the road for a year. Were you aware of that, or a different timeline for the closure while the permanent repairs are being done?
Unless I didn't get the postcard, nobody really has heard anything about this plan. It was only from my direct communication with the mayor, and her helpful responses to me is what brought it to our attention. The electronic signs on Shannon since August said that this program was going to be completed at the end of December. So we're 1 month away, and we've been totally in the dark.
If I could follow up on one thing. So strategy 3 involves full closure until the plans can be implemented. But my understanding from tonight's testimony from our Parks and Public Works Department is that following that, there would be a full closure for a year to accomplish the permanent repairs. So given that that's the strategy to do the permanent repairs, to close for a year, do you have a different reaction to closing full closure for the period until the repairs can start?
Well, first of all, we have no idea when the repairs would even start. I mean, there's no agreement with the private property owner, and and I guess I'm not an engineer, but I don't know that it would be agreed upon that the road has to be closed for a year as opposed to doing the one lane for that period of time. I guess we're just, I wasn't aware of the 1 year closure. I don't know that it would change my mind, only because we have no idea when we would get approval, when funding would be approved, and when a project would actually start. I think interim repairing and repaving the road until we get more clarity on what happens is I think what our neighbors would want.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce, thank you for speaking up tonight. I did have a question for you. I mean, it's been brought up by staff that, this is a really, really, really extensive rebuild involving retaining walls and a ton of other things. And you, as somebody who's on that road, you know what that road looks like and the area around it. Given the construction would take a year in the most expeditious manner, having one lane open during construction would not only drag out the project, it would put us exactly where we are right now with the one lane and the dangerous driver behavior. So,
right.
That would be a concern to me. The fact that I'm not putting you on the spot, but you just said you might be interested in a proposal where the construction allowed one lane to be open. But I think our driving public has demonstrated that they're not capable of keeping everyone safe. Could you comment on that?
That's a fair point. I mean, I don't want to pretend to speak for the community on this kind of new information for me, having the road closed for a year. I think I'd like to maybe spearhead some community action and gather some input for the council.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. Thank you for being on the call, and we will close public. Or do we have any other hands up?
There are no more hands on Zoom.
Okay, we'll close public comment at this point and move to council members for questions and comments. Vice Mayor.
I have a question for the town attorney. What is the town's liability exposure in the event of a serious accident with council choosing a strategy that still would have risk factors?
So to clarify, are you talking about strategy number 1? Okay. All right. Well, with regard to the traffic control and signage and the fact that drivers aren't obeying, I have informally consulted with Defense Counsel, and they indicated that so long as the town had the traffic control in place and had signage, explaining why the traffic control was there, the town would have a strong defense in the event of a claim resulting from an accident. And then with regard to the other two, I think it's going to come down to, was there adequate signage warning the public of what the condition was and why the road was closed?
Thank you.
Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. With regard to strategy 1, are there any opportunities for enhanced traffic control? I mean, if I recall, Highway 9 just outside of Saratoga, near Saratoga Springs, was closed for several years to one lane, and the configuration is not that different in the curves and the size of the road there. But I remember approaching it and thinking, never thinking there was any possibility of going around the controls that are there. So are there any enhanced controls like a gate or cameras or other things or fencing, or other things that would limit the exposure to the dangerous conditions?
Thanks for the question. Yes and no. I mean, I think the whole idea of strategy one is that we would provide enhanced signage for safety, but the idea of automated gates or cameras are outside the scope of what we could do in that remote area.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, in terms of, I think one of the things as I was trying to figure out why people are behaving so badly here and not elsewhere, and I think we had that conversation, and you've come up with some ideas where, in some places where it's a long wait, there's actually a sign saying, wait could be up to 5 minutes or something. So sometimes letting people know how long they have to wait. The other is, when I first heard of somebody stopping at the red light and proceeding like it was a stop sign and almost having a head-on collision, I thought, well, what the heck? Somebody said, well, why don't you put a sign that says stop at the red light, don't go until there's a green light. And I thought, well, are we going to put that at every intersection? But maybe we have to assume that people are just not thinking. So I don't know if you could address those, but then I will go on because I have some other concerns with this anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly the type of signage we would look at, and I'll look to the town engineer to see if he has any more detail at this point, or if we're still just thinking.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Those are the exact things we've been thinking about, adding a CMS board up there that has that same exact messaging. Stop at the red, wait times could be in excess of 3 to 4 minutes, those types of safety messages.
Okay, and I think also letting people know how long, I mean, the thing's like a quarter mile, I think, right? So it's not like you're going to see a car. But my concern with this first option is that at any given time, the traffic signal could stop working. And so if we're 100% dependent on people, no matter how much signage we have, if the light goes out, if somebody drives into it and knocks it over, it's in a remote location. I know that our engineer, Gary Heap, has gone out there on his own to check on it, but this concerns me if we can't even rely on drivers to follow regular rules and do crazy things. But on top of that, there's also the uncertainty of if the infrastructure doesn't work, it's a fatality, or it's a head-on collision, because this isn't an intersection that people will treat like a stop sign. So I don't know. I mean, anyway. This one makes me uncomfortable to continue. I don't know if you have ways to assuage my fears or how well it's been working.
No, it is designed based on standard practice. It was designed, the traffic control up there was designed by a licensed traffic engineer who stamped the plans. It is the best that we can do. Yet there is that possibility that, like any signal in town, that it goes down or goes dark. And so that is a realistic possibility.
Okay. And it doesn't sound like we're talking about weeks. We're talking about potentially months, 6 months, until we can get to construction. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. Best case, yep.
Okay. So we have that in mind. All right, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. So another question. Granted, this is a remote area. So where are the complaints coming from? We have maybe 30 residents up there. Are they residents that are complaining to the police department or to the town manager?
Yes, all of the above, and to Parks and Public Works. And I think it's a combination of residents, probably because they're there most frequently. You're most likely to be a mile from your house, right, at any given time. So they see it, I think, most frequently. But I think don't underestimate how many people use Shannon Road to come over from Hicks, from San Jose as a commuter route. It's a pretty heavily traveled roadway.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to ask that. I mean, do we have an estimate? I mean, I would say it's got to be hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of cars a day, given the route. Do we know what the throughput is?
We did look into that recently. We don't have any recent counts up there, and obviously couldn't be taking new counts now. The counts we have are at least 10 years old, but it was several thousand vehicles a day at that time.
Yeah, as someone who uses it, and there's a lot of houses there, people come into town that way. It's a big cut through. All right, and Councilmember Moore.
So I think in terms of what we're talking about this evening, strategy 2 seems to make the most sense to me. I think all of these are going to be painful. I think the road closure is going to be incredibly painful, but I think that strategy 2 eases the pain most effectively, and we do theoretically, hopefully, have a little bit of money left over to pay for that. And I think that's a good thing to do for the residents, to ensure that we're closing the road for the minimal amount of time possible. But it's, there'll be costs to each of these.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was thinking, if we're looking at spending about the same amount of time to do the one lane in each direction, or to do option 1, I'm sorry, where it's the one lane, and option 2 is going to require closure. While it's done, it'll be a few weeks. It is sort of putting lipstick on a pig. I mean, we're basically doing something where we're going to throw it away at the end. On the other hand, it doesn't cost really any more than keeping one lane open. And it, in my mind, reduces the risk associated with impatient or terrible driver behavior, enhances people's safety. I think if we were going to be the most cost conscious, we would go with option 3, but I think I'm less concerned about the people that cut through on Shannon, because there are options to go on Blossom Hill Road. But for the people that live close to this closure, to have to go all the way around on a regular basis is excruciating. We can't alleviate their pain during the construction, and so I feel like I hate to put more pain on them beforehand, especially when we have no control over what it's going to take to get to construction at this point. So I'm definitely leaning that way. I hate to spend money on something that we're going to throw away, but I view that in an investment in at least alleviating pain for these residents. Manager, did you have a comment to make?
I just wanted to, if I may, ask a question. That if we were to go with option 2 and work with our existing pavement contractor, we would most likely have to bring a contract amendment to council. Is that likely to happen before the end of the year? I just want to make sure you have a sense of expectation that if we do move forward with option 2, when would the repair occur, and when would it be back to a two-lane situation?
Right, that's a great question, because then we also have to decide, do we want to close the road beforehand, or do we want to continue with the one lane? Do we have...
I'll say I don't see any reason why we can't bring an item in for probably the December 19th meeting, but I also wonder if there might be a path forward for us to do the work on an emergency basis and then retroactively amend the contract. So I think that's something we can explore with the town attorney, who doesn't seem to be kicking me under the table right now, but she might be later. So I don't know if we can really pull that off. But I think it's incumbent on us to find the fastest way forward that we can, that actually still meets our requirements for transparency.
Okay, so if this is the will of the council, we move forward, then I'll leave it to you and the town attorney to figure out the most expeditious way to implement what we need. And if it's required to come back to us, it will. But if it's not, and it can be done under an emergency sooner, obviously,
I think
it's
it's
better.
definitely coming back to you. It's a question of whether it comes back before, during, or after the work gets done.
Perfect. Councilmember Hudes.
Yeah, having listened to everything, I think that strategy 2 makes sense, and it is an expensive proposition, but it's in the overall picture of $4 or $5 million to repair the road, I think that it's worth doing that. Although I have to say I'm a little skeptical, having walked out there recently. They look like more than voids to me. It really looks like a serious situation. So I hope that we can do it for that amount of money, but I wonder if it might come back as more money than that, given the condition out there. It was really kind of frightening the way so much of the underpinnings of the road seem to be, just missing. But I am supporting strategy 2. The one thing I would suggest, though, is that if we do move forward, that we start really making the residents aware of an impending closure of a year, and put some signs up there, that this is a temporary item, and that there'll be a permanent repair that may involve closing the road for a year. We need to get that word out there, and the best way to do it, I think, is a sign right on the road. We could figure out how to do mailings and things, but I think that would reach the people who are actually using the road.
We definitely can pursue that, and just to be clear, we have always expected that we would need to do some pretty robust outreach before that was implemented. We were assuming we would do it when we got a firmer construction schedule, but given the recent events, we can start earlier.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw that in the report, and that included outreach. Clearly, that'll have to be done before the construction, but it'll probably have to be done now if we move forward with option 2, because that will involve a complete closure while option 2 is being implemented. So do we have a motion? Councilmember Moore.
Sure, I can make a motion, but I was just going to piggyback on what Councilmember Huda said. I think now would be a good opportunity to put up some signs that do say, again, totally up to y'all what that looks like, but I think that when we're doing these interim closures and we're starting to do this kind of major construction out there, I think alerting the residents that this is coming, or potentially coming, but probably coming, will be important. If people are planning, if I was taking a long vacation, I might want to plan it right in the middle of when the road's closed. So maybe not the best example, but I like Councilmember Huda's idea there.
Thank you. And I mean, clearly there will also have to be detour signs and everything else, but I'm sure in the outreach it sounded like there was mailing to the residents, and then there will be signage before the road starts. All right, so do we have a motion? Councilmember Moore.
Sure. I will make a motion to move forward with strategy 2 on item 17, strategy 2 being to implement interim repair of the damaged lane on Shannon Road. Is that a clear motion?
And then I have a question. I'll second it. I have a question. Do you need clarity on how to go until we do that? Will we continue with the one lane? We're not going to close the road before we start the construction.
Correct. We'll retain the one-way alternating.
Okay, good. I wanted to make sure that was in. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any comments? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Yeah, that's going to be fun for nobody. Next, we will be moving to, give Director Burnham a moment, moving to item 18. And am I looking at the town attorney or the town manager for the report?
Town attorney.
Thank you.
So this follows on a policy committee meeting that took place several months ago. And this item is for the council to consider options for updating the town's code of conduct. It's to get the council's preference on several terms, and then once I have council's preferences, I can return to the council with a proposed draft. So I'll start with the questions unless there's any more general questions about the code of conduct.
Does anyone have any general questions? Okay, let's move through that. Thank you.
Okay. So as written, the code of conduct addresses issues other than conduct. And it also talks about council member roles and responsibilities. And so I'm interested in feedback from the council on whether they would prefer that the code of conduct be one chapter in a larger policy, or whether the code of conduct be a standalone document.
Okay, Councilmember Hughes?
For the mayor, is this going to be a dialogue with the town attorney, or how does this going to work? Are we going to get a staff report and then public comment? How's this going to run?
Thank you. Attorney Whalen?
I wasn't planning an extensive staff report. I can go into more detail if that would be helpful. Alternatively, if what I've provided so far is adequate, the mayor could ask if there's any public comment.
Okay. As you were proceeding before, you were just going to read each of the questions that you wanted us to answer?
That's correct.
Yeah, so not a dialogue, but that's part of the report, and then we'll go to, just so we know what questions we're being asked to answer tonight.
Okay, so I do have a question.
Okay.
Has ACLU and Ms. Clark withdrawn their threat of litigation regarding the code of conduct?
No, they have not. I contacted ACLU's counsel yesterday to request a written withdrawal. I have not heard back from the ACLU yet.
And if I could follow up, when might we expect a response? Did we specify a time for a response? And I guess they can respond however they want, but when can we expect a response?
If I haven't heard back after the Thanksgiving holiday, I will probably call ACLU counsel. And so I imagine that we would know in 2 weeks.
Okay, so I don't know what the right procedure is for this, so maybe someone could advise me, but I think it's not appropriate to be making changes to the code of conduct when there's a threat of litigation, and so I would like to see this item continued until we have a resolution on that, and I think it's ill-advised to be making changes to the code, but I don't know procedurally what's the right point to do that in the way that we're handling the hearing.
So through the mayor, so one option would be for a council member to make a motion to continue this item until either there's been a definitive written statement from ACLU that they're withdrawing their threat of litigation, or until the statute of limitations is run, which would be a year from the incident, which I think would take the town to February of 2024.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you. For the town attorney, would you mind providing your perspective on the risk there? I don't see a big risk in discussing this right now.
My assessment is that it's a low risk in that the town acceded to the ACLU's request.
Okay, that's my assessment as well. So I'm perfectly comfortable having this discussion. But if there is a council member who doesn't, I don't know. I guess that's up to the mayor, perhaps. But yeah, I don't think there's a big risk here. I don't think the ACLU is going to sue the town of Los Gatos if we change the code of conduct.
I have a question for the town attorney, and that is, typically if somebody has threatened litigation and then we've complied with some of the requests, is it typical for somebody to issue a letter saying they are not going to sue, they're never going to sue, and is that letter binding?
It's not typical. It's not binding, but if they were to sue, it would be a good defense to the lawsuit.
Thank you. Councilmember Hughes.
Yeah, a follow-up question. Does it happen that sometimes an employee or a member of a body leaves office and then decides to file a lawsuit for various reasons, and I'm not going to get specific about the reasons, but does that happen?
Yes, it does.
Okay, then I'd like to make a motion to continue this item to the time either of a written response from ACLU regarding the withdrawal of their complaint, or to the statute of limitations expiring, whichever comes sooner.
Vice Mayor.
I'll second it. Worst case scenario, February 24th is not that far away. Low risk is still risk, so I'm going to second the motion.
Any comment?
Did we need to take public comment?
Yes, we do. Thank you. So we'll hold this for the moment, and I have no cards in front of me. That's my prompt, since I don't have any cards. I apologize. And do we have anybody's hand on Zoom?
Nobody on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. So I will close public comment. I'm really slipping on protocol, aren't I? And so we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Moore.
Yeah, so I think this is way overly cautious, but if there's two council members who don't want to have the discussion, I guess we won't have a productive discussion, so we can continue it. Unless other council members want to have the discussion.
I'm not seeing a point in having a discussion with only 3 council members, so I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you to staff for putting all this work into it, and hopefully we'll get that pulled up again in February. All right, that's the last item on the agenda. We have everything we need. All right, with that, I will adjourn the meeting.